Okay, welcome everyone to this meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee for Wednesday, 12th of June 2024. Fortunately, we're starting on time, and I thank the convener and vice convener of scrutiny and performance for I thought there's a real risk that could overrun. I actually thought the agenda today was probably going to be, if you asked me a few weeks ago, might be a bit light. In fact, even though we don't have a revenue monitoring or capital monitoring paper, there are quite a number of items to get through. If it's required, we'll take a comfort break. If I think it might be halfway through. But anyway, welcome you all along. Usual rules, keep your microphones on mute throughout the meeting, unless you're speaking. I'd also remind councillors, officers to use the chat box to attract my attention, and I'm unable to have a visual of everyone attending the meeting on my screen at the one time, and that's the only way we can ensure that everyone has a say. Now, also at the top table we have here, obviously, Grant Laying as the vice convener, and Grant is going to chair, I think it's 3 of the papers, and you'll see in due course. Kirsten, and also this, along from her is Lisa as head of legal and governance, and obviously is Thomas Glenn, our chief executive. So anyway, without further ado, Kirsten, could you advise people of any apologies and so forth? And I think it may be we perhaps will only have one person online, but we'll find out in a minute. Okay, on you go.
Thanks, convener. We have an apology this afternoon from Deputy Provost Parrott with Councillor McCall substituting, and an apology from Councillor Shires with Councillor James substituting. I think the only member joining us online this afternoon is Councillor James. Can I just confirm he's present, please?
Hi, Kirsten. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. All other members are present in the chambers, convener.
Thank you, Kirsten. And next thing, and then I'm going to turn to Councillor Grant to make, he wants to make a comment on one particular thing, but can I also ask, are there any declarations of interest? There being none, I'm then going to ask Grant to tell us about something I think people will find most agreeable and very positive. On you go, Grant.
So thanks. So on behalf of the council and the whole of the people of Perth and Kinross last night, I was fortunate enough to receive the award from Booking.com, where we became in 2024 most welcome region on earth as Perthshire. And I was surprised by the amount of people who had voted for us to achieve this award. I think this says a lot for the residents, the people who work in the hospitality trade, who are often possibly undervalued by us, and also the people who operate hospitality. So I just want to make sure that it gets in the press. It's all about friendship, etc. And I think obviously they've been watching some of the council meetings, and that's been taken into the scheme of thought about how we get the most friendly. So yeah, I think it's a really good thing for Perth and Kinross. It's worth publicising, and it's across all our wards. So.
That's excellent news, and it builds on some of the successes we've had recently, not least obviously with Perth Museum. I see Councillor John Duff wants to. John, you want to make a comment?
Thank you. Yes, convener. I'm delighted to see that the millions of users of Booking.com have discovered what we in Perthshire already know. That we're privileged to live and serve the people of the most welcoming and hospitable place on the planet. I too welcome this fantastic accolade, which acknowledges the friendliness and welcoming nature of everyone, residents, businesses across all of Perthshire, and it's a tribute to them. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay. Yes, I think it's absolutely excellent award and accolade. Right. We move on to item 3, the minutes of the last committee meeting on the Wednesday, 24th of April. Does anyone have any comments, or are there any matters arising, or can we agree the minutes? Agreed. Okay, we now move on to item 4, and this is on the outstanding business statement. Now, there was, in fact, only one outstanding item, and that related to Tayside contracts. I had eventually received a formal response from Tayside contracts, and you got a copy of that letter. I think it went round, I think probably a fortnight or so ago. However, Lisa Simpson, as you can see, is going to meet with the clerk of Tayside Contracts Joint Committee and the head of legal Angus Council over the summer, and this is to discuss the merit of agreement and the voting arrangements. However, so it is completed, but does anyone have any comments on that?
Yeah, I just think it's a disappointing outcome that we haven't moved forward in any shape or form with Tayside contracts for elected member involvement and upping the amount of scrutiny that goes on there. So we'll just have to see what comes out with Lisa's meetings, and we'll try and move forward. It's our biggest ALIO, if you want to call it an ALIO, organisation that we have a third of, and it's something we should have more scrutiny. I'm glad it's going to be, they're going to appear at our scrutiny committee moving forward. That's all.
Anyone else? Any comments? Okay, that item is completed, but clearly I'm sure one way or another coming back to the subject of Tayside contracts in due course, and we will see what happens on the talks with other parties over the summer. Right, now going to move on to item 5 on the agenda, and oh, sorry, Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I'd just be keen to know how the talks that the head of legal and governance is going to have over the summer will be reported back to either this committee or somebody of the council. I do share the leader of the council's anxiety about the governance of Tayside contracts and their openness to scrutiny, and it seems to me to be a dissatisfactory situation that we're not able to resolve this, but hopefully Lisa might over the summer, but we need to know what the outcome of those discussions are.
Lisa, yeah. Okay. So it will come back in one shape or another, and we know the importance of the matter.
Perhaps, convener, we could keep that part of the action as a live action on the outstanding business statement, and that would provide me a mechanism for updating.
Okay, quite happy with that. Yeah. Okay, next item on the agenda is the first substantive paper, and it's on our people and culture strategy and with our overall workforce. I'm going to ask Pauline Johnson, who's just going to the podium, to introduce the report. Pauline.
This report is submitted to seek approval of the People and Culture Strategy 2024 to 2028, which is an appendix to the report in front of you. This strategy replaces the Corporate Workforce Plan 21 to 23 and has been developed by the Strategic Leadership Team, who will own this strategy and the iterative action plan. Progress on the actions and any new emerging issues arising during the life cycle of the strategy will be reported annually to this committee. This is a new strategy
designed around the Council's values of ambition, compassion and integrity. This strategy provides a sustainable approach to resource planning and works in conjunction with other plans and strategies that have been agreed within the Council. The objective of the strategy is to enable the delivery of a sustainable approach to workforce development and a flexible and agile workforce with the right skills, values and attitudes to meet the needs of our communities now and into the future. The report and strategy outline the context in which the Council operates. This operating context continues to evolve and change, and our people need to be prepared and be able to adapt to meet the current and future workforce requirements and expectations. Additional measures and initiatives in respect of the financial context may also be needed going forward and will be considered in conjunction with this strategy. Paragraph 5.4 in the report outlines the key issues identified from the consultation process undertaken with staff networks, trade unions and managers across the Council, and I would like to thank them for their contribution and engagement. This is the beginning of the journey, and we look forward to continuing to work with them to deliver the actions in the plan. The aim of the strategy is set out in paragraph 5.5 of the report, and a workforce planning group with service representation will be created following committee, and this workforce planning group will actively manage the actions in the plan. The strategic leadership team will ensure that these actions are embedded into their service operating models and are reflective of the values and behaviours expected of our people across the organisation. The strategic leads will also consider localised initiatives and mitigating actions for the development, skills and knowledge of their people. Our people will be given the opportunity to innovate, adapt and grow and embrace the ethos of a 1PKC employee. They will be expected to role model our values and behaviours in all that we do. Together with our partners and key stakeholders, we will create a solid foundation to coordinate planning, focused on need and deliver on our vision of a Perth and Kinross where everyone can live well, free from poverty and inequality. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Pauline. First question, and I'm sure there may well be others, is from Bailey Bailey. Alistair?
So my question on this one, sorry, I hadn't anticipated I was the first question. So within the appendix, it mentions that trade unions have been consulted on the contents of the proposal, but there's no commentary on what the feedback was and how that consultation process ended. So I welcome that we have the goal of continuing our strong and positive relationships with trade unions, but wondered what their response was to this specific proposal and report we have in front of us. Thank you.
The trade unions were part of a focus group where we discussed what would be contained within the strategy itself. They welcomed the strategy and they welcomed working with us going into the future to make sure that we supported the people across the organisation.
Councillor Cuthbert, Dave?
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, my question relates to page 24. It's the bit under fewer children and young people. It says that the Census 2022 indicated that there had been a reduction in our 0 to 14 years population, minus 14.7%. And then it says compared to 15.9% in 2011. Was that a drop in 2011? Or was that an increase? It's not terribly clear.
That's a drop.
Councillor Stewart, Colin?
Thanks, Convener. I was interested in paragraph 514, which reports on the staff survey from that was live from the 15th of April to the 31st of May. The last bit of that says that the results will be factored into our action plan and reported in future updates to this committee. But the last few pages of the strategy are actually an action plan. So I'm just wondering if we approve this and the content of it, which is an action plan today, how quickly will we be updating that as a result of the staff survey?
We are still collating the responses and going through the staff survey. As we've said, this is an iterative process. It's set out indicative timescales and action plans, so it's a working document. And we will be incorporating whatever the outcomes and the actions that were taken forward from the survey, and we'll report that on an annual basis.
But just to clarify though, there will be an iterative update of the action plan prior to an annual update of the strategy.
That wasn't the original plan, but if the council are wanting an update on the employee survey, then we can bring that to them separately.
I think, given the importance of the workforce to the delivering on the outcomes, the council's outcomes, we would. I'm sure other councillors would be wanting to see the output of the staff survey as soon as that was ready and available. Thank you.
Right. Next question is Councillor Duff. John.
Thanks, convener. My question is probably a kind of general one. In terms of job vacancies, and I know we do have slippage targets and such like, but in terms of jobs that we're actually trying to fill at the time, are we finding them increasingly hard to fill? What sort of types of jobs is that, and what practical measures are we taking to actually attract and retain staff? Thanks.
Yeah, the types of workers that were hard to fill are increasing. And you'll see from the strategy that there were a number of re-advertisements and the occupational types that were set out within there that we've had to re-advertise posts for. This is probably due to changes in the labour market and trying to attract. So we are being proactive, but part of the action plan will be to focus our efforts, work with further education colleges, look at what else we can do with partners in terms of collaboration and how we can engage to get a throughput of individuals. We will also look at talent management and our own internal resource and how we can reskill and upskill and move resources to where there's the greatest need. So we are looking at a whole different range of tools and measures to try and support where those areas are hard to fill. Some of them are qualifications, and therefore it will take longer in terms of throughput. So again, it's important that we work with further education colleagues, and we are looking at from the national newly qualified social workers. We are putting in measures to try and retain the students that are coming to us as a good resource. So there are measures like that that we're actually applying now, but we will continue to expand on those as we go through this period.
Okay, before I come to Councillor Illingworth, I know Thomas Glenn wants to make an observation.
Thank you, convener. Just picking up on Pauline's response round about the workforce challenges. I happened to be on a meeting this morning with colleagues from Solace and the Improvement Service round about workforce, and that picked up the National Workforce Strategy, which has been referenced at COSLA recently, and local government's response to that will be picked up by Solace at its autumn conference. The challenges that we are facing in Perth and Kinross are similar. Some of them will be particular to ourselves, but they're similar to 32 local authorities across Scotland in terms of budgetary pressures, age profile. I think about 8% plus of our staff over 60. Skills funding, some of the challenges we've got in there. Recruitment challenges when we're competing against a private sector, and rates of pay might be different as well. And particular skill shortages in some disciplines, and it was highlighted nationally a 97% response rate from all local authorities in terms of particular challenges in health and social care, round about statutory and regulatory services, planning, procurement, legal. So those challenges are challenges that have been experienced right across Scotland, and we will continue to do our best to attract people to Perth and Kinross. But I think we've got something special in terms of kind of how we're looking to work with local communities. So we're not unique in that sense. It's a challenge that everybody's experiencing just now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Thomas. Okay, move on now to Councillor Illingworth. David.
Thank you, Convener. Often the biggest impact on staff engagement is relationships between staff and your immediate supervisor. Are you able to give me any detail or information about training and support that is given to sort of lower level supervisors? For example, perhaps the corporals and sergeants, if you like, of the PKC world.
Our opportunities for learning and development are available to all staff. We have a leadership for all programmes, so all of them are leaders in everything that we do and how we expect them to behave and comply with the values and demonstrate those values across the organisation. So there's opportunities for training, learning and development both on the job. If the service want to fund qualifications in particular roles, they can do that. They can look at their own talent pipeline, but all the opportunities that we deliver in terms of learning and development are available to everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to, I'm not seeing any further questions. It's a second question from Councillor Cuthbert. So Dave, fire away.
I've actually got two questions, if I may, if you'll indulge me. The first one relates to...
I will.
Thank you. That's very kind. The first one relates to this question about recruiting people with the right skills. My question is, have we made an approach to Perth College to see if we can actually be offering courses that will actually train people in the skills that we need and sort of do a joint working type thing to actually get the people we want, train them in Perth College and actually employ them here part-time so we create the right employment opportunities?
We do have really good relationships with Perth College UHI across the organisation for particular occupational groups, and we do work with them to look at what we're wanting in terms of the skills and the knowledge that we would be expecting them to try and actually train people and provide the qualifications so they're ready for work. So that's not just through one group, that's across all different occupational groups, so that we're looking at particular career routes into work in the council.
Okay, I'm going to take, I think Sheena, yes. Sheena Devlin, you want to make a comment. Sheena?
So Cuthbert, I can give you some practical examples, concrete examples of just exactly the kind of thing that you've spoken about. We've run a successful men and childcare qualification with Perth College over the years. We've also run various joint courses around learn to work in early years. They support our approach to learn to teach. And we've done a very specific piece of work around trying to increase the number, which we have successfully done in terms of home economics teachers, where the college agreed to run a specific course that focused on the home economic teachers, and we provided some staff actually for that course. So as Pauline says, dependent on particular professionalisms or areas where we know there are likely to be shortages, we have got a very successful record of working in concert with Perth College around some of those areas. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheena. I'm going to, out of courtesy, take, I think you may have one further question, Dave, and I will take that, but Councillor Barrett, Peter.
Thanks, Convener. I think it's a very positive document with an awful lot to be welcomed within it. I was keen to know how the values and behaviours framework and promotion of the organisation's values of ambition, compassion and integrity in practical terms have kind of altered our recruitment process to ensure that we get the people, you know, who exemplify those values.
We have amended our recruitment process to values-based, and we still do some competency level questions, but we also look at the values and all the three values that we want individuals to demonstrate and to operate as leaders in the council. So sometimes we will look at how they fit into the team, what that means in terms of their own values, how they fit with our overall organisational values, and how best we can enhance that. And that's trying to put the action plan around the three values is not just paying lip service, it's actually making it operational in the way that we do things, why we do things, why we're here, what our purpose is, and how we expect people to behave throughout. So again, that's something that we are measuring as part of the recruitment and selection process when we're recruiting people.
Dave, you've got one more question.
Yeah, it's going back to the question of the reduction in children over the last 21 years. By my calculation, it's 30.6%. Now, I assume that that's kind of a trend. Do we have numbers going forward? Is it possible to get a summary sent to the councillors just to show how we're expecting those numbers to vary over the next 5 years or so?
I'll see what I can find out. I don't have that with me.
Right, and Councillor McEwen. Tom?
Thank you, Convener. 85% of our senior management team is over the age of 50 years old, and only 12% of our total staff are under 30. So how are we getting the bright ideas of the young staff that we have to build the dynamic council for the future without speaking to Provost?
We recognise that that's a trend, and therefore we've actually added it into the action plan as something that will be a priority for us to focus our efforts on improving that trend. It's not unusual for people in senior leadership roles to be in that age bracket, and you would expect that to be natural progression in terms of career. But we are targeting the younger workforce and seeing what we can do to actually improve that statistic.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. I know, Councillor McCall, you're going to come in with a comment in a minute, but I'm now going to move the paper. And I don't think I need to tell you, but of course, our people do really great work to deliver I think, the best public services we possibly can for the people of Perth and Kinross. This strategy builds upon the foundations laid by previous decisions of the council, and it's an enabler for our continued journey to reshape the organisation. This is a key and fundamental aspect of our overall transformation programme. But our organisation, as it responds to significant changes, to opportunities, to challenges that the council and the wider public sector are facing. I think by basing this strategy indeed around the values of ambition, of compassion, of integrity, it will ensure that we embed this way of thinking, working and being into how our people contribute and conduct their business with our partners, for those we serve across our communities. And Pauline has already referred to, in answer to one of the questions, the way that we have amended our recruitment process. I think this strategy recognises our people's contribution. It sets out the vision, the aims, the aspiration for our workforce, and our commitment to ensuring that we have the right people in the right places, allowing teams to be at their best. Ensuring that they have access to training, and that's so important, and aspect raised by Councillor Cuthbert just a minute ago, and opportunities, training and opportunities which allow them to develop and demonstrate the skills, the values, the attitudes needed to deliver a sustainable approach to workforce development across the council. This strategy provides clarity of direction and our commitment to continuous improvement and growth. It also demonstrates how, as an employer, the Council continues to drive forward the Fair Work agenda. Remember, we had a paper on that a few months back, ensuring that fairness and equity is at the heart of all the Council's employment practices. It confirms our commitment to promoting equality and diversity across our workforce and to actively support and advance equality of opportunity. I very much recommend approval of the provisions set out in the People and Culture Strategy and the associated action plan. I'm more than pleased to move the report.
Thanks, Convener. I'm happy to second the report. I think we accept Councillor Stewart's suggestion and officers will take that on board. So we'll make that caveat on seconding the report, but happy to do so.
Yes, absolutely. Right, for comment, I'm going to take first of all Councillor McCall, Sheila.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Pauline, for the report. I have a role as a Vice Chair of the Employee Joint Consultative Committee, so really my comment is partly in response to some of the questions raised, but I firstly want to say in that particular role and serving on that committee since I was elected in 2017, I can pay testament to the amount of work and effort that goes into the people strategy and engagement with trade unions, elected members through that particular medium. And I think if I'm correct, Pauline, a verbal update will be given on the employee survey at the next meeting. So, I mean, it's quite an important committee, and anybody who's served in that, say, nodding head, at least from Councillor Hearn and Councillor Revick, it really is quite an important committee, and I'm more than happy to engage with any elected member who'd like to know more about what goes on there and what subject matter comes forward. So I'm happy to provide that assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Now, Councillor Barrett. Peter.
Thanks, Convener. I just wanted to thank you for zoning in and homing in on the equalities dimension in the strategy on page 9 of the actual strategy itself, and for drawing attention to the good recruitment practices and employment policies. I think it's also important to commend the role of our staff networks and the contribution that they make in terms of supporting people from a variety of groups with protected characteristics, making Perth and Kinross a more welcoming and supported employer in terms of the peer support that can be obtained by people who work for the council. So I just wanted to emphasise that as well. But as I said previously, I think it's an extremely positive report. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And I think probably finally, Councillor Duff. John.
Thank you, Convener. It's often said, but it's nonetheless true, that our staff are our greatest asset, and we need to ensure that we look after our employees, their employment conditions and their careers, and allow them to both value their work and their workplace, and to have their work valued in return. I very much welcome the report, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Pauline and our team. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, I don't see any further requests to make a comment. So can I ask the committee to, if the report can be agreed? And Pauline, thank you very much. Grateful to you. Right, we move to the next item on the agenda, and that's the procurement update. I think you knew the procurement strategy for the next 5 years will be taken at full council in 2 weeks' time. But this is the update on the position for 23-24. I'm going to ask Lisa Simpson to introduce the report, but I'd also just point out to you we have present from the procurement team both Lindsay Stewart and Vanessa Robertson. And thanks for joining us. Lisa?
Thank you, convener. Councillors, as a local authority with a regulated contract spend in excess of 5 million, we are obliged in law to prepare a procurement strategy and to report on that annually. This is an annual report on the procurement activity and performance for the year 23-24. And as part of that report, we also have a note of all tenders accepted for that period and also for all grants and payments made in accordance with our policy of following the public pound. As part of a forward-looking part of that reporting, we also have notification of likely contracts that are planned for delivery over next year and the 2 years that follow that. As the convener said, a new 5-year sustainable procurement strategy will be presented to Council for consideration and hopefully approval at the end of the month. And that is actually linked in and is culmination of work to date under the transformation and change activity that has been looking at the procurement function and how that we can drive greater value from that for ourselves internally in terms of efficiencies, but more importantly, to drive greater value for the people of Perth and Kinross. In terms of the report, this is the last report, therefore, that you will get under the existing strategy. I'd like to draw your attention to some highlights around that. We have had £390 million of regulated contract spend and have awarded 340 regulated contracts. The bits that you'll probably be interested in is 87% of those contracts have been with small and medium-sized enterprises. 52% of our contracts were with Perth and Kinross-based suppliers. And our local spend was in the region of £84 million, which is an £8 million increase from the figure last year. From the work that we've been doing in the Transformation and Change programme, we believe that that is an underestimate because we have had difficulty capturing data in terms of subcontractor spend, and that has been an area of priority for us going forward to look at how we can better capture and get better quality data around that. So we are hopeful that that figure will increase next year. In terms of local suppliers, there are 35 more local suppliers on our Public Contracts Scotland portal, which allows them to engage and take advantage of contracts that are available. That now brings the total of local suppliers to 926 on the portal, which is something to be encouraged, and that will be a focus for us in terms of the new strategy to bolster that local spend and to increase the number of suppliers who can access contract opportunities with the council. We've had a lot of major contracts this year. One in particular relating to our treatment of residual waste. That's been one that was a very complex contract, took an awful lot of work. Lindsay, I think, is still recovering from the amount of hours, weeks, months that she put into that contract. But that's one that we're particularly proud of because we've looked to drive environmental benefits through that by tackling issues around the carbon benefits that we can drive by reducing the impact of waste haulage through more sustainable transport solutions. So we'll be very eager to see how that progresses as we monitor that contract going forward. We've also looked to enhance community benefits, and we've had employability opportunities increased through that mechanism in terms of apprenticeships, training opportunities, work placements. We've also had some not directly employability related community benefits, but which have been of great social benefit, in particular some of the ones, for example, supporting the football programme at Perth High School. So there's been an awful lot of things and opportunities for us to enhance the social value of the procurement function going forward. As I say, Lindsay and Vanessa have put in an awful lot of work in pulling together the annual report. I would like to thank them for that and also thank them and their teams for the huge amount of work that they've carried out over the last year. We're all here to take questions and we look forward to presenting our new strategy to Council in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, Lisa. And just as Lisa was saying, we're also very grateful to Vanessa, to Lindsay, the whole team for the work that they put in, and it's very thorough, very detailed. Right, I'm going to take questions now. First question is Councillor Drysdale. Eric.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Lisa, for your report. I'm really delighted to see the increase in the number of local businesses that have benefited from these contracts. Over half of all the contracts in 23-24, and from the tables in the paper, I can see the increasing value of that over the years. There's a comment made just at the bottom of page 54, which says that the council has a policy of encouraging local businesses to bid for the public sector work, and that's clearly having success. Just for my better understanding, can you tell me how we encourage them, and and how do we raise awareness? How can we grow that figure even more?
What I would say, Councillor Drysdale, is obviously we're limited in what we can do in terms of the legislation, but the team do work really hard to raise awareness, and I think it would be better if Lindsay or Vanessa gave you some details, some of the more innovative stuff that they've been doing.
There you go. Don't know which Lindsay or Vanessa wants to.
Thank you. So we're continuing to build relationships with the Chamber of Commerce, and with working with the Chamber of Commerce, we're planning to engage more with local suppliers to find out what it is that they actually are looking for from us in terms of support, how we can assist them in better completing their tender documents, and the intention is that we will start attending the Chamber of Commerce regular meetings that they have with suppliers. We also attended earlier this year the Tayside Meet the Buyer event. We don't have the figures from that yet in terms of attendance from Perth and Kinross businesses, but we did promote that locally via our PKC social media channels. Another change that we made was a change to the council's contract rules. So we've increased the quick quote threshold from £50,000 to £250,000 for works contracts. And what that does is allows us to better target those local suppliers, because where we're issuing quick quotes, the end user services are actually identifying and able to select the suppliers that they invite to quote for those works. We are, as part of our ongoing work for the transformation project, due to revisit and update our contract rules. So that is a figure that will be considered as to whether we keep it at 250,000. The regulations don't apply to that value of work, so we do have scope to increase that threshold higher if that's what's decided. Thank you.
Lindsay.
That's great, thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Lindsay. Move to the next question, and that's Councillor Barrett. Peter.
Thanks, Convener. There's a lot of information in the report, and a long list of the items that have been put out to tender under the quick quotes procedure, and just considering the information that we've just received about the limit of that being raised to 250,000. How do we know from this report or any other report the actual performance of suppliers of goods and services, whether they're adhering to the quotes that are provided, or whether there's overruns in cost or undercharges, and how are those reported to elected members?
We'll go to Lisa first.
I think in terms of the procurement function and the scope here, this probably deals with the point at which contracts are awarded, and from that point onward, it would be whoever was the contracting service to manage and monitor that report. I mean, clearly with large scale construction and capital contracts, that's monitored as part of our capital monitoring reports. So these high spend, high tariff contracts are monitored, but in terms of routine contracts for goods and services, that would be a matter for individual services and teams to be managing and monitoring that contract. And unless there was a particular issue that was raised to us in terms of compliance or breach, that's not information that would actually be known to the central team.
Okay, thanks for that, Lisa. So do we have kind of variation limits whereby if contracts are exceeded by a certain percentage, that gets flagged up to somebody? Because it's certainly something that never comes across elected members' desks.
Lindsay, there you go.
Thank you. So under the procurement regulations, we're only permitted to vary a contract award by up to 50% of the original contract value. The end users, if they are varying a contract, should be making us aware of that, because we do have to then make updates to our contract register to ensure that that information which is publicly available is accurate. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not sure I caught Lindsay properly there. Was it 50 or 15%, did you say?
Sorry, 50%. Yeah.
Next question is from Billy Bailey. Alistair.
Thank you, Convener. While acknowledging that this will become a tedious meeting if we all dig into the numbers in the reports, there is one that I think deserves a little scrutiny. On page 71 under tenders accepted, there is a £73,000 charge for maintenance over 3 years, it states in the report, for the zip taps, the boiling water taps. I've had a bit of a discussion with officers before the meeting, so I understand that that might actually be a 4-year figure, but it still gives me some concern, and I wanted to add that in the meeting because actually it seems that Dunelm along the road have kettles for £8 each, so it means we could actually be buying a new plug-in kettle every 7 days for the cost it's taking us to service the zip taps. So I wonder if officers could give any reassurance about the plans to reduce those costs. Thank you.
Stephen Crawford. Stephen, I think you want to make a comment.
Thank you. I'll answer that question. The 73,000 is a 4-year contract, and what we've got is over 41 zip taps at the moment. That contract's direct with Zip. As the paper says, we're in the process of removing zip taps in the offices in those environments due to the high maintenance costs. So what you've got is a 4-year worst case scenario, and I fully anticipate the annual cost in the next 2-3 years will reduce significantly.
Okay, that'll suffice. Right. I think probably the final question is once again Councillor Duff. John.
Thanks, Convener. Just to go back to page 54, where it talks about the local contractors' percentage of the contracts. I recognise it is an increase in terms of the overall amount of 8 million up to 84 million, but it is also a drop of 2% in the share of the total spend, which I think is equivalent to about 1.7 million if my quick maths is accurate. I just wonder, what are we doing to try and make sure that as much of the contracts that we are letting are awarded to local businesses in Perth and Kinross? Thank you.
It was that particular point why I was keen to emphasise that we actually believe that that's an underestimate, because what we haven't had visibility on, just in terms of the way the data that comes through us, is the amount of subcontracting. And we know for a fact that there are a lot of local suppliers who do get subcontracts, particularly from our large construction contracts, but that's not captured in our data. So one of the things that we've done as part of the Transformation and Change project to be able to get better visibility of that is more work around how we capture data and how we analyse that data so that we can get a truer reflection of what local spend is. So whilst it looks on that it has gone down, we actually believe it has gone up, and particularly with the award of large construction contracts this year, we know for a fact that local suppliers are subcontracted.
Thank you. I think that additional detail would be very welcome. Future. Thank you.
I think so. Stephen Crawford wants to add to this.
If I could just maybe add to what, anticipating this question, I as the procurer, as the senior officer responsible for the construction contracts, for all the major construction projects, we do meet the buyer events in the concert hall. So we'll come forward with Riverside, Perth Museum, Perth High School, and Blairgowrie. It's a case of meet the buyer events to see if we can generate local interest for all the major subcontracts. The figures I've got at the moment, because we track this through the Hubco model, through the social value portal, is Riverside, of the £20 million contract, about 60% of that generated employment and local work for subcontractors within the East Central Territory, and that would be really Tayside. We're looking at a similar figure for Perth High School, and just slightly reduced for Perth Museum. So we have got significant amounts, so that whilst we send the ultimate main contract check to somewhere in Stirling, there's a lot of that money is spent locally through tracking, operatives on site, where are they travelling from, where's their postcode, and with and endeavouring to work with meet the buyer events to get local suppliers and local social enterprises involved in delivery of these public sector projects.
Stephen, John, do you want to? Yeah. Okay. Got a second question. Ulster Bailey.
Thank you. The question relates to community benefits arising from procurement, and that's covered on page 58 of the document pack. So there's some laudable things here, including the £7,800 given to one of our suppliers, given to Perth High School by one of our suppliers. My question is really about why we have to do it in this way. It's possibly a silly question, but community benefit money doesn't come from nowhere. It's still taxpayer money. Why do we let suppliers spend our money on our behalf and stick their logo on it rather than getting a cheaper price from them and then deciding democratically how to spend that money? Is there a requirement that we go with people who are going to then give a portion of our money back to our schools essentially, or is it within our gift to do that? Thanks.
So I think your understanding of community benefits and what we're referring to as community benefits is totally different. This is their money. This is something that we build into their contract to say you need to give something back. If you get this contract, we would like a part of it to be directed in this way. Vanessa could actually give you some examples of how we use that, but it's not money that's filtered through. It is their money and their effort and their benefit in kind that they are giving to us. Yeah.
My point is these are commercial organisations. If they win a contract with us for £1 million and they put in there that they'll give £8,000 to Perth High School, that is £8,000 that presumably you could otherwise negotiate off the £1 million that you're paying them. The money is coming from us, in essence.
Vanessa, then.
Yes, so this particular pot of money that we're referring to here, so SPA is the Scottish Procurement Alliance, so they put frameworks in place that Perth and Kinross Council use. We're one of the founding members of SPA and we sit on the board. So every year we get a £10,000 community benefit fund from them, and organisations can bid for that money. So Perth High School put in a bid for 7,800 and were successful. So this isn't coming directly from a contractor in this instance. In other contracts where we've got community benefit clauses, the contractors don't just decide themselves who's getting that money. That would be done in consultation with the client service. So it's not just they decide that a certain school are going to get a particular benefit. And what we're going to try and do in future is make sure that when we report the community benefits, it's aligned to our corporate priorities, so you can see what benefits everything is having, along with how it aligns with what the council's aiming to achieve, really.
Okay. Grant.
Can I just get a point of clarity on the question raised? A lot of the community benefit is benefit in kind. It's because they've got bulldozers or diggers or whatever you want equipment on site, and they'll go and do work that's then costed in rather than something. So you can actually get a much bigger value than if you have got two men and a digger on site for 3 days. It's worth more than £2,000. So I think a lot of it. Is that correct? That's what I'm asking for, just clarification on that.
Yep, that is correct. And the other thing that we do and try to encourage is, can they offer work experience opportunities or apprenticeships or things like that? So it's not necessarily something that's an item that's bought or given or money given back. But what we want to do going forward is be much more focused and targeted on making sure that the benefits that we're driving from these are aligned to what the council has decided is its corporate priorities.
Thank you. Thank you. It's just really a follow-up to the question that Bailey raised. And would it be fair to say that many of these large corporations have separate budget items for things like community benefits, sponsorship, etc., that sits aside from their day-to-day operational budgets for delivering on contracts that they win?
Lisa.
I believe so. Yes, the large organisations will have budgets that they use for that purpose.
Okay, there being no further questions, am I going to move the report? Clearly, the council does have a statutory duty to report retrospectively on its procurement activity for the previous financial year, and also to set out its planned procurement for future years. This report is the final update under the existing procurement strategy, and clearly we're going to get quite a bit more in 2 weeks' time on the strategy going forward. You're requested to approve the publication of the annual report, procurement annual report for 23-24, and that's attached as Appendix 1. And also note the record of tenders accepted under the council scheme of delegation. In addition, the committee, you're being asked to note the planned procurement activity set out in the 24-25 contract delivery plan and payments made to external organisations last year under the council's reporting requirements for following the public pound. And if you look, in fact, at how that is presented, so on page 79, what we've done this time is to take first the ALIO analysis and the Tayside contracts analysis, and then followed up with the external organisation analysis. And if you look at the figures, clearly, you know, the size and the scale with the ALIOs and Tayside contracts, really, I think it is of immense importance. Just to say, procurement is central to the delivery of council services and includes revenue expenditure and capital investment in the council's infrastructure and assets. The purpose of the annual update, that's to demonstrate how our procurement activity aligns with our strategic outcomes and the delivery of best value services to the people of Perth and Kinross. Lisa's already referred to, in the last financial year, how we awarded 340 regulated contracts, our spend being of the order of 390 million. And some of those key contracts awarded, and we made some reference to this already, include residual waste, a range of social care and support services for vulnerable individuals, and also the supply of wheeled bins, which I don't think we've mentioned. The residual waste contract in particular was significant, not only because of the value of the contract, but also demonstrated how procurement can be used to further our wider strategic ambitions in terms of a transition to net zero. The procurement team, the likes of Lindsay and Vanessa and the others, really are to be commended for designing a contract specification in such a way as to encourage more sustainable transport solutions, hence reducing the environmental impact of waste haulage. It's also our public procurement process is very important for the local economy, and you've heard some of the figures already. I think, need to repeat them, but I think what is important, and also what Stephen over there was saying as well, is in many ways, for instance, you take Perth High School, Riverside, it's an underestimate. We show an underestimate of the actual position and the overall impact on the economy. So I think it'll be interesting to see what the figure is for next year, given the work being undertaken on the transformation programme. I very much look forward to 2 weeks' time, and I'll be in a position I can ask some questions myself. But it's also, it's like the workforce plan, the people and culture paper earlier. It really does tie in so much to our transformation programme. Finally, I just want to move the report and indeed once again thank the team for the hard work they've put in, and there's more to follow, as I say, in a fortnight. I move this report.
Thanks, Convener. Obviously, I'd like to second this report. I like the way that we're moving towards more of the spend staying within Perth and Kinross while fulfilling what legislation asks us to do. That's all good news. I'd also like to thank all the procurement team. In fact, this is the longest time I've been in the presence of procurement team, and we haven't talked about cake. So I'd like to thank them. I'm sure that must keep them going down there, because it is an important part of the procurement team. So thanks for all your work on this. And I, like the rest of the members here, will look forward to 2 weeks' time when the new procurement policy comes to us. Thanks.
Okay, going on to comment now. Councillor McEwen. Tom.
Thank you very much, Convener. I've always felt it's really important that this council works well with external organisation and volunteer groups. Appendix 4 of this paper highlights in great detail some of the awards that this council has made and contracts it has with these external groups. We've got the Community Environment Challenge Fund, the Community Investment Fund, the Good Food Grant, the Green Living Fund, service level agreements through our service committees, and the Warm Welcome Fund. You know, these funds total £6.7 million worth of spend. And for the community groups, working with our volunteer groups, £3.9 million worth of spend in the last financial year. And I think this demonstrates the importance of working closely with these groups to provide services and support to the people of Perth and Kinross. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Stewart. Colin.
Thanks. I'm just literally now prompted by Councillor McEwen's comments. I would echo exactly what he said about the value of the spend in terms of the cumulative impact that we can generate from the community groups and the third sector. In terms of going forward, I know that the procurement strategy is coming in a couple of weeks to full council, but it might be worth thinking about for reporting how we can quantify the outcomes and impacts of this third sector spend so that we can actually sort of demonstrate that there is an absolute you know, it's not just a feeling, a warm feeling that we get as elected members when we go out into our communities and we see the good done by the Community Investment Fund, but there's an actual quantifiable benefit that we can point to in terms of following the public pound and getting best value. But just a comment, but certainly I agree with everything that Councillor McKeon said.
I don't see anyone else wishing to make a comment. So can we agree this paper? Great, thanks very much. Right, I'm now going to hand over the chair. I think it's probably a bit too early for a comfort break. And I noticed the comments there from Thomas Glenn, and thank you. But I'm now going to hand over to Grant Laying to chair the paper on the Pitlochry asset review. So Grant.
Thanks very much, convener. And this is an important step along the road to us condensing our offer within communities and also enhancing at the same time. So I'll just hand over to Stephen Crawford and Ryan Graham to present this report to you.
Thank you. The Pitlochry Asset Review. The paper seeks approval to consolidate and optimise assets to enhance the council service offering in Pitlochry for the benefit of the community. Initial scoping indicated that many of the buildings were significantly underutilised, ageing and required investment. Initial options were informed by the Pitlochry community priorities in the 22-27 plan, and funding for this review was included in the 22-23 revenue budget. This review commenced in summer 23 with the Big Conversation event in Pitlochry as one of the first engagement sessions for the new LDP process. The review was carried out with consultation with over 20 separate meetings and public events in person since last summer. At events in the community, with the community, school parent council, pupils and service users, they were all requested to give their views on the buildings and services in Pitlochry. Indicative plans and options were considered at the meetings and feedback received through an iterative consultation process. The focus of the recommendations is to develop a campus model in Pitlochry, and this is supported in part by the previous 2019 recommendations for the Lifelong Learning Committee to develop and invest in the building for the school and the community, and is also informed by the need for affordable housing across Perth and Kinross, and particularly in Pitlochry. This report follows that path. Concurrently, the Council has approved a policy of prioritising vacant buildings to affordable housing where appropriate. So plans and programmes included in the report and in the appendix are indicative, and an approval of this paper with resources gives authority to officers to progress to detailed design towards and seeking formal approvals, such as planning for much of the investment. This report was also considered in draft by the Strategic Investment and Advisory Group as it was set up as direct recommendation of Council in January. So the recommendations were reviewed by the CIAG Group and is considered the officer recommendations. The do nothing option was never an option based on the review findings. Without going through every single recommendation in the report, committee has requested to consider the report and approve the report, multiple report recommendations. So myself and Ryan, who's led on the ground, we're more than happy to take questions.
Thanks, Stephen. So I'll open up to the committee for any questions on this report. Bailey.
It's a question that's a tiny bit broader than this report, so I welcome this report, and it was a thorough process that went through to reach this stage, including enjoyed the debate at the CIAG as well. Will locality asset reviews now automatically happen for other borough towns and wards, or is that something that we would need to specifically request that officers undertake? So just a question really about next stages and where we go now. Thank you.
Stephen.
In January, the council approved the corporate asset management plans across all the asset streams. Included in the property asset management strategy was the principle to adopt an asset challenge at each locality level, but also at each service level. So concurrently, we're working with obviously bringing this forward at Pitlochry, but we're obviously looking at the office estate within Perth. We're looking at the secondary estate across Perth. And we're looking at the leisure asset estate within Perth. So all of these are going on concurrently. But no, the next process, as we've said in a number of reports, is that Cooper Angus would be the next locality that we would bring forward.
I think it would be said it's an ongoing review that will move. It'll be a moving feast constantly. Thanks. Provost McDade.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I just want to pick up at 5.6 of the covering report, which talks about the community feedback to the asset challenge. And in it, you talk about the place-based conversation, starting the conversation at that point, and then having workshops with the community, which I think was maybe about 7 of, and multiple meetings with interest groups. One of the things that has been brought up with me, both at the Parent Council and by members of the community, is just around the engagement of the young people in the process. And I'm aware from speaking to the head teacher that there was work done in the school, but I'm just wondering if you can perhaps talk a bit more about that, because obviously they are key stakeholders in this process.
Brian.
Yeah, we engage with the school quite early on with regards to the young people in the school. So we set up a day of workshops going from primary school with the primary teachers and support, which was interesting. And then we went through the secondary pupil council. They were then fully supported by the community, the school librarians, to then take that forward, and it empowered them to have a series of sessions with their peers, which fed back through us, which we've also shared with the community, because there were some things that were wider within this review for the kids who wanted things in Pitlochry.
Follow up.
Yeah, thanks very much. If I can just follow up on that, that's really positive to hear. And just in terms of next steps, similar sort of Bailey's, but specific to Pitlochry, in terms of next steps, when you go ahead to detailed design, will there be further work with the pupil council and with the young people in the school?
Yeah, as Stephen's mentioned, that once we have the authority to proceed on this, there will be further detailed design, further consultation. We've already had a subsequent meeting with Parent Council to tell them that that's the next stages forward, especially with the young people. And I think it'll probably be more beneficial with the young people going forward once they see plans and the impact in their school and community.
Okay, Councillor Pierre Barrett, please.
Thanks. I was just hoping that the officers could kind of tease out paragraph 516 and the recommendation for option 2C over option 2B on the grounds that it delivers greater value and aligns better with the strategic ambitions for the community. It does seem that the favoured option is an enhancement on existing facilities at a time where facilities are contracting elsewhere in our area, and it's significantly more expensive than the other two options.
Yeah, we'll hand to officers. I'll maybe come back myself on that.
Thank you. I'll take that question. We looked at, obviously, the direction of travel right from early in the review was the development of a community campus, and there was a range of options and what was the extent of facilities provided there. We looked at the options, and we've just gone through a procurement report and everything's about saving money, and we've looked at what could we do. My paragraph 5.23 was and it was my recommendation to the SEAG group was I presented in recommending option 2B, which was meeting the needs of the curriculum and largely meeting the ambition or the needs of the community. There was a discussion at SEAG and members the recommendation from SEAG was to go forward with 2C on two fronts. One, meeting the aspirations of the community, but also not agreeing with my somewhat pessimistic views of the utilisation and potentially the income that could be generated from that. And so that's written in the report, and that was the process we followed to come forward with the recommendation of 2C.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Vice Convener. My question is with regards to, or relates to paragraph 5.3. The new campus model incorporates, as we know, the library and leisure facilities, and there's some helpful statistics about the current use and costs of these. And I think we will recall back to budget time, we recognised that without this type of project, then it's likely that the library and leisure facilities within Pitlochry would be lost. My question relates to the use of the leisure facility within the new campus model, and are we confident that within that new model that members of the public will be able to access the leisure facilities during the day when the school is in an improved additional hours and the types of activity that they currently have will be improved upon? Thank you.
Ryan.
Yes, we've done an analysis of the usage the school currently do at the Athol Leisure Centre. This is obviously a bigger facility as well, but we are looking at concurrent daytime use and weekends as well for community on top of the school. The early scheme designs show a 4-court hall that can be segregated into two 2-court halls, so we can still keep that segregation between school, and the gym is fully accessible upstairs, and that we've based a lot of our costs on a far increased offering, which will be worked through.
Do we have any further questions? Councillor Stewart, you put your hand up there.
Yeah, so it was just on this question that was considered at the Strategic Investment Advisory Group, SEAG, about the increased potential for income generation from the enhanced facilities. If the enhanced facilities are a replacement for Live Active Athol, will the new enhanced facilities be run by Live Active Leisure? So will the income stream benefit the council, or will it benefit Live Active Leisure?
Stephen.
I'll try to answer that, but ultimately Live Active Leisure is an arm's length organisation. So any additional income it generates, it ends up in a reduced subsidy, so less cost to the council. The current leisure operation is only 5 days per week, and there's certainly every ambition here. My recommendation was based on a conservative estimate. The ambition is this is going to be a 7-day-a-week. So a 7-day-a-week operation, obviously with additional costs, but at the same time, much increased use, and so additional income for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Ellingworth.
The car parks in Pitlochry always seem to be really busy. Are we able to use income from the car parking in the calculations?
The car parking account's ring fenced only for car parking. Do we have any other questions? Provost McDade.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to also ask a question around the support for, so obviously the recommendations. We're talking about the support for the community asset transfer of the Cloycar Depot and Pitlochry Town Hall. And I just want to tease out the fact that there is support in place within the council, as I understand it, to support the process of community asset transfer. But I'm just wondering if you can give us a bit of an overview of what support has been offered to these groups to date and what will be offered going forward, because obviously we want to see a success, we're recommending it here, so we also want to see a successful community asset transfer. But if we don't provide them with support to achieve that, then the recommendation's going to fail. So could you provide us a bit of detail on that?
Ryan?
Yeah, we've been supporting these groups pretty much from the moment of interest with the community learning development team, community planning team, but we've also brought in third sector individual specialist advice from COS and DTAS, which gives them an open and transparent understanding of how to run a facility, but also shared with them the cost we've incurred over the past and what costs we foresee in the future with full build condition reports. But we've continued to go on with them and looked at how they would transition in that way as well. We've also worked with them to try and, because there's more groups than what is actually buildings available, so we've tried to get them to co-locate as much as possible, which is why Cloycar Depot has 3 or 4 groups amalgamating into one. And there's also the Pitlochry Town Hall user group looking to go with the Pitlochry Community Action Trust. So they are looking to come together and better use the facility and make it more sustainable. But we will see supporting them until, I think they're looking for full community asset transfers in January, but there's a full process to go through before then.
Okay, I see no further questions on this paper, so I will now move the report. Before I move the report, I'd like to thank the officers involved, especially Ryan here, who has been extremely responsive to any questions that we put forward to him, and it's been a big piece of work along with Stephen and his team, but I want to put on record my thanks for the work that you've both done, and if you can pass on your teams as well. So in January 2024, Council approved its corporate asset management framework, which had a number of asset streams, one of which was property, each of these having a distinct strategy and plan. The purpose of the framework was to ensure that as an organisation, we take a more cohesive, strategic approach to asset management and investment. To support that, we have together created the new SEAG, Strategic Investment Advisory Group. And that's the last time I'll not be using an acronym, sorry, Councillor Cuthbert. It will be SEAG from now on. SEAG has all political groups equally represented, and that is supported by senior officers. I felt the SEAG group worked very well together, and there was a lot of difficult questions that have been raised here and many others during the meetings that we had. And I thank the political groups for having their representative attend and support this formation of this paper and their input. The property asset management strategy and plan looks to ensure that we have a cost-effective property portfolio which meets our service delivery requirements and the needs of our communities. It recognises the need to rationalise our property assets to not only reduce running and maintenance costs, but also to make sure that our portfolio supports our wider climate ambitions to reduce our carbon footprint. In Pitlochry, we are piloting an approach which looks at property rationalisation on a locality basis. The detailed report before you is the product of extensive community and stakeholder consultation and internal cross-service and partnership working. I'd again like to thank all the community, the officers and local ward members for their hard work and the quality of the engagement to date, which has allowed us to bring a recommendation here today for consideration and I hope your approval. Members will see from the report that the officers had initially presented option 2B to the SEAG as the preferred option based on the data available in terms of projected usage, etc. The options were discussed extensively, but the political preference was for a more enhanced community offer. Whilst this is a slightly more expensive option, members considered that the more extensive offer would result in increased usage by the community, generating the necessary income to offset future costs. Given the financial challenges facing the council, we must make any investment decision that we make worth it. We are optimistic that the more enhanced community offer presents better value for the community and therefore warrants that extra investment. This investment of nearly £9 million in Pitlochry reinforces this council's commitment to continue to invest throughout Perth and Kinross. I'm delighted to move the recommendations within this report. These represent a pulling together of a number of our strategy strands which reflect our ambition as a council to work in partnership with our communities at a local level to design and deliver services that best meet their needs now and in the future. I hope this will have the support of everyone across this chamber. Thank you. I'd like to ask Provost McDade to second this paper, please.
Thank you, Vice Convener. And firstly, I would also just like to express my thanks to Ryan Graham, who has put in significant amount of work on this project over the past year, and also to Stephen Crawford and Claire Mailer for their leadership as well, and their significant amount of support both to the community, myself and other local elected members during the process. And it has been a very interesting pilot project, which I think will be very positively received elsewhere across Perth and Kinross as it is rolled out. A significant amount of public engagement has gone into the asset review to gather community views with, as we've heard already, 800 comments received, as well as 7 public sessions, a number of key stakeholder meetings, and we heard also earlier in answer to my question from Ryan around the engagement that's been undertaken with young people, and I think that's really important because actually often we're talking about schools, but we're not always necessarily hearing from the people who are actually using them and the people who are most affected by the decisions we are making, perhaps. So it was really good to hear that we are listening to those young voices. I did attend Pitlochry High School 20 years ago, and not much has changed since then. And I believe my colleague Bailey Williamson attended it, and I don't think the science labs have changed since then either. So it's very positive to be in a position where actually we are able to upgrade these facilities. As a constituent said to me recently, it's very nice to walk through the school and see all the nostalgia that you remember from your own days, but actually perhaps something from the 1970s isn't perhaps suitable for modern day learning environment. The asset review built on, the significant public consultation that we undertook during the school estate review, and during that process, hundreds of local residents, staff, and pupils gave their views very strongly that what they wanted to see was investment in not just the school, but in the community and greater services, and the creation of a community campus was very much the focus of that, and this does fulfil those requests and those demands. And it also builds on the 3.7 million that is mentioned in the report that we've already invested in upgrades in the school. So it's a significant investment collectively. As a pilot project, there is always going to be some learning out of it. And I think we have already noted various things that we would do differently going forward, and we will absolutely take those points on board and look to improve things. But there is also the benefit of being a pilot project. You get more attention because you've got to do extra work to get that learning. So I think we also saw that. I'm very pleased that the conclusion of the asset review is not just a closure of services, but actually it is about investment. And I think that Pitlochry has felt significantly underinvested. Most of our other significant communities over the last 20 years have had new build high schools, community campuses. We've currently got Blair Recreation Centre being built at the moment. We're looking at PH2O being built in Perth, and Pitlochry is the only place that in my entire lifetime hasn't had a significant council spend. So this is the delivery of investment in our communities. And the proposal to spend 8.7 million, and Councillor Barrett noted earlier that was more than had initially been proposed, was due to, in part, a commitment we had given to the community of there being no detriment. And option 2B, which had been initially recommended, did include detriment compared with current facilities in terms of the size of the sports hall, and therefore that commitment that we had gone out and set out that we weren't going to have detriment is now being delivered. So I think this is a really good news story for Pitlochry, really good news story for the school and for the community in terms of the significant increase of hours that Councillor Duff mentioned earlier, going from 7 hours a day, 5 days a week to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, will allow people to actually utilise the facility properly and utilise the community, allow the community to utilise the facility properly. And just finally, it's also worth noting the improvements within the school. This is not just about leisure facilities, but actually this is a full refurbishment of the current technical suite. It's a refurbishment of the home economics department, it's new science labs. It is a refurbishment of the spaces within the school to create a much more conducive learning environment for modern day standards. And it also allows us to utilise our estate for the benefit of the community by creating social housing in the area. We have a lack of affordable housing, which is probably the single biggest challenge in our ward in Highland. It has caused issues in recruitment in health and social care with teachers and other key workers. It's also causing huge issues for businesses who can't expand due to not being able to recruit and retain staff. Local employers are busing people in from 30 miles away because they cannot house staff locally. We have the highest percentage of second homes in Perth and Kinross. Over 40% of the second homes in Perth and Kinross are in Highland Ward, and that's taking up affordable housing stock. And this asset review will allow us to house nearly a fifth of the families and individuals who are on the housing waiting list and listed as being in immediate need of housing in Pitlochry. And that is a real win, in my opinion, for this council and delivery for the community as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Barrett, I think you have an amendment.
Yes, thanks. And I wanted to give you early notice that I was intending to put forward an amendment so that everybody who wants to comment on it can. It's a fairly straightforward amendment. I agree with 90% of what everybody has said so far. But I think with regard to the detail of the first hollow bullet point in dark bullet point 3, my amendment would be to change from option 2C to option 2B with a gym oblique 2-court games hall instead of the 4-court games hall that's proposed. And I don't do that lightly. I am concerned that the SEAG has not done what was said on their tin, and that they haven't taken a dispassionate strategic approach in considering the options A, B and C. I think that there could be down, you'd say yourself, that there was a balance or a spread of all political opinion, but there's certainly a geographic disbalance on the SEAG, and I wonder whether that has played into the consideration of the recommendations and the proposals that have come forward, proposals which I think are in stark contrast to the evidence-led approach taken to the review of leisure assets in Perth City. In Perth City, we're having to consolidate 3 facilities into one, where we already know that existing sports users will not have their sports activities delivered as part of the range of sports and activities on offer in the new facilities. And members in this council are having to take hard but realistic decisions on what we can afford to provide in future. In Perth, there has been close scrutiny and analysis of sports usage numbers and trends, and cessation or reduction of facilities for sports where participants are in declining numbers. However, in Pitlochry, it appears that a contradictory approach is being taken, built on the shaky foundation of if we build it, they will come. So I'm really concerned that the recommendation is for a gold-plated proposal which far exceeds the current usage and needs of the community, and that the proposals are iniquitous. They do not reflect the cash-strapped position that the council is in, nor the severe challenges that the council faces in its capital budget. Challenges that many in this chamber continue to refuse to address adequately through the council budget and council tax setting process. But when it comes to Pitlochry, it's gangbuster times, and let's spend another £2.5 million or £2 million with very little consideration. Option 2B is the sensible option here. It meets the needs of the school community and the wider community, providing significant access during school hours for the wider community. And it's a significant improvement and investment in our rural towns and areas. But we should not set a precedent for future locality asset reviews for the most expensive option and facilities. So I propose that we go for option 2B and the 2-court facility with it. Yeah. Thank you.
That's fine. Last for said, I would like you maybe to reconsider about the there was a bias with the people sitting on the SEAG, because then we would get into all sorts of when we go to other meetings when we've got 12 city centre ones. I don't think there was any bias.
I don't think I said the word bias. You can check the record to say there was an imbalance, and it clearly was an imbalance.
But I think we all look across Perth and Kinross rather when we're sitting in this chamber or when we're sitting in committee, rather than just specifically our own areas. That's my feeling. You can feel differently, but across when I come in here, I don't solely represent Strathty, I represent the whole of Perth and Kinross and try and do what's best for all. Do we have a point of clarity first from Provost McDade?
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, I just want some clarity on Councillor Barrett's amendment. He outlined option 2A, not option 2B, and also the SEAG's interference was also to increase the opening hours. Is he also objecting to that? Because he seemed to indicate that his amendment included that, but that was one of the changes SEAG also made.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my amendment is quite clear. It is just the change to the first hollow bullet point, changing option 2C to option 2B and the 4-court games hall to the 2-court games hall. Everything else remains.
Okay, I think that's quite clear. Clarified that. Thank you. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Barrett?
I'm happy to second that. Thanks, Scott.
Okay, do you wish to say anything when you're seconding it?
I don't need to say anymore.
Okay, thank you. We'll just go to comments first before we go to the vote. Do we have any comments? Councillor Revick.
Thanks very much, Vice Convener. I know this paper's wide-ranging in terms of Pitlochry. From the point of view of Learning and Families Convener, you'll indulge me just really speaking about the Pitlochry campus or proposed Pitlochry campus. I'm really very supportive of this, therefore, notwithstanding the angst and hassle that will often come with change of this magnitude, and I thank staff at the school and pupils and parents at the school for the patience throughout that. But notwithstanding that, 9 million quid's a serious amount of investment in the school, and I think it does 3 things actually. I think it brings Pitlochry in line with our other rural towns like Crieff and Kinross and Auchterarder and Aberfeldy, and I'm fairly sure I've probably forgotten 1 or 2, but the point is it does bring us in line with our other rural towns. I think the second thing it does, which is very important, is I do think it future-proofs Pitlochry School. And I think the third thing that it does, which is important from my point of view, is I think it brings the school and the proposed campus into the heart of the community. I firmly believe that that's where our educational establishments should be, at the heart of our community, and therefore I support this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Revick. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. I'm going to steal that turn of phrase from Councillor Rebeck, actually, about having these education facilities at the heart of our communities. And that would be my rebuke to the accusation that there's any kind of imbalance within the SIAG or SEAG, however we say that. representing a ward myself that has no secondary education provision, I'm quite happy that we ensure that we do it well the times we are able to do that, and the locality asset review won't come around again within a generation to Pitlochry, I'm sure. So we may as well do the job right while we're there, and maybe one day we get one in the Castle Gallery in our own secondary school, but that's for another day. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Councillor Colin Stewart.
Thanks, convener. I'm very happy to support the recommendation today. I think this is on a broader point. I think this is the sort of project which should be absolutely at the heart of how the council develops and transforms in the future. We've taken a step back. We've gone in, looked at the facilities, looked at how we can rationalise them, and come up with a proposal which will be cheaper to run net in the longer term, which will rationalise our estate, but offer more of that estate to community use and increase community use of our estate, while also dealing with the problem of affordable housing in a rural area. I'm really excited by this type of project. I think it deserves our wholehearted support. I can't wait for a review of this to come to. I know that we're a smaller community in Cooper Angus, but I think that there are real opportunities in our rural towns and boroughs to develop and learn lessons from this project and take them forward and repeat and rinse and repeat until we've been through all of those assets and we're enhancing the quality and sustainability of the offer to our local communities, and I'm wholeheartedly in favour of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener. I reflect a little bit on the times when the Dewar Centre and the Perth Leisure Pool were first built in their new facilities, and they were built on a size and scale based on a falling utilisation or perceived falling utilisation, but in fact that decrease was largely due to old facilities and facilities that weren't suitable for purpose. And of course, as soon as they were opened, they could not meet the demand that was there. So I think that the paper presents what I think is an aspirational but very realistic move towards more community-based, not just leisure and sports facilities, but also we have a public health imperative across the whole of Perth and Kinross. And I think with a flexible space and the additional opportunities that additional sports halls will offer, I think there's a wider opportunity other than just the traditional health and fitness aspect of it. So I thoroughly support the paper as presented. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCall. Councillor Duff, would you like a recess? So I see no more comments. I'll grant you your 5-minute recess. Thanks, everybody. So we've had the motion moved and we've had the amendment moved and comments. So I'll hand over to Kirsten to just formalise what you're voting for.
Thank you. Members, we're on item 7, the Pitlochry Locality Asset Review. We have a motion from Councillor Lane, seconded by Provost McDade, to approve the recommendations outlined in the report, which consolidate the community facilities and a redeveloped secondary school community campus model as per option 2C with the gym, forecourt games hall. We have an amendment by Councillor Barrett, seconded by Councillor McEwen, to consolidate community facilities and a redeveloped secondary school community campus model as per option 2B with the gym, 2-court games hall.
Kirsten, I'll forgo my right to sum up and I'll ask Councillor Barrett if he wants to sum up.
Just very, very briefly, I'd like to thank Councillor Tom McEwen for seconding my motion. I thought it was in a tumbleweed moment there as amendment. Just trying to muddy the waters there. I don't disagree with very much that previous speakers have said. I agree with what John Rebeck said, and also Councillor Stewart. I think we differ when it comes to the size and scale of the facilities that I'm proposing will meet the community's needs and aspirations. And I think that the affordability and not setting unaffordable precedents for future is important. Councillor Cuthbert gave me a fantastic line, which is the question, to be or not to be? That is the question. So hopefully, I've suffered the slings and arrows many a time, but yeah, please consider voting for option 2B. Thank you.
Thanks. Happy to go to the vote.
Thank you. Members, when I call out your name, can you please let me know if you're voting for the motion or amendment? Bailey Ahern.
Amendment.
Bailey.
Motion.
Councillor Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Chan.
Amendment.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Dunn.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Lane.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Ms McDade.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor.
Motion.
Thank you. We have 13 votes for the motion and 3 for the amendment. Therefore, the motion carries.
Thanks, and I'll hand back to the convener for the next paper.
Thank you, Grant, and seems my mic is working again. Okay, next paper is one we have every year. It's the authority to write off debts and obsolete stock, and it always comes just after the end of the financial year. Also links into the production of the annual report and accounts. I'm going to ask Scott Walker to introduce the report. Scott.
Thank you, Convener. Good afternoon, councillors. The report before you today seeks approval to write off debts relating to sales ledger, council tax, non-domestic rates, irrecoverable rents, housing benefit overpayments, car park trading income, obsolete stock, and some other miscellaneous balances. The write-offs are included within the report before you today because we have exhausted all other efforts to date to collect them. The accounting entries arising from these write-offs will be included in the unaudited 23-24 annual accounts that the Audit and Risk Committee will consider on the 24th of June. The table of paragraph 4.3 and detailed in Appendix 1 sets out the sales ledger write-off of just over £187,000. Paragraph 4.8 and Appendix 2 sets out total council tax write-offs of £397,000. This is lower than last year because during 22-23 we did a targeted exercise on the no trace category and cleared a large quantity of irrecoverable debt. As with all such write-offs, these may be reversed should we subsequently locate the debtor and are not time-barred from resuming recovery action. In relation to council tax, I'm also able to share the national collection statistics that were published a couple of hours ago. It was announced that we are third equal across Scotland, just 0.2% off the top of the league and 2% above the Scottish average. So once again, I'd like to thank colleagues in local taxes. Paragraph 4.11 and Appendix 3 sets out non-domestic rates write-offs of just over £681,000. This is higher than last year because in 22-23 we processed a net write-on totaling £423,000 from historic credit balances that we could not refund, either because the address was unknown or the customer had not provided bank details to facilitate a refund. For council tax and non-domestic rates, last year we specifically targeted accounts to better gauge what was truly outstanding, but do mean that the figures are not comparable with those of previous years. The figures this year have reverted to a more standard approach and amount. Paragraph 4.17 through to 420 and Appendix 4 set out proposed write-offs totalling £369,407 in relation to housing rents, garage sites and sequestrations. Paragraph 4.22 and Appendix 5 sets out proposed write-offs in relation to housing services funded by the General Fund. In paragraph 4.24, we're seeking authority to write off £344,664 of car park trading income. And finally, in section 4, we're seeking authority to write off some stock and some miscellaneous balances. Consistent with previous years, in section 5, we're seeking authority to waive charges for all adult care and support services for people seeking asylum with no recourse to public funds and refugees. In section 6, we provide an update on fees and charges and seek your authority to increase charges for Obitus media services and products at the crematorium to ensure that the council covers its costs. Finally, I need to stress that the write-off of debt is only recommended after all means of recovery have been exhausted. Although the amounts are written off for accounting purposes, the files are not closed, and every effort will be made to collect the outstanding debt where new information becomes available or where recovery is cost effective. Colleagues, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Scott. Do we have any questions? Not seeing any so far. Councillor Rabbit, John, and yeah.
Thanks, Convener. Just a very quick question, please. I know that we, in our budget, wrote off some school meal debt, notwithstanding the cost of living crisis. I think that was the right thing to do. I know Scottish Government have also made money available for councils to write off school meal debt, and I'm just not clear where that leaves us as a council.
So just to be clear, it wasn't in the budget. The debt was written off last year. At this time, we wrote off school meal debt. However, we have been alerted to a school meal debt fund. The Scottish Government have identified £1.5 million that councils will be asked to bid in for. We have to put a submission in by the 1st of August in order to attract that funding, but that will be the amount we get will depend on the totality of the bids.
Councillor Drysdale, Eric.
Thanks, Convener. I think I asked a question about this area last year at this time, which is in relation to 4.24, the car park trading account. I appreciate that there's a time delay between issuing of parking tickets and the write-off. But obviously there's a significant increase in the level of write-off this year compared to last year. I think 55% in monetary terms, and I think 45% in terms of the number of penalty charge notices. Can you clarify why that is? Is there what should we be reading into that unsatisfactory trend?
So thank you. The figure last year that we wrote off was artificially low because it was done during COVID times. There was 6 months worth of COVID during that. So the number of PCNs that we actually issued was a lot less. We're now back to a normal level of activity, and that's why the figures this year have increased back to what we would class as a normal level.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Right, mic's back on. I don't see any further questions. Okay, I'm going to move the report. And as we, obviously this is the report for 23-24 financial year, and we consider this report once every year. Stress the council makes every endeavours to collect all the debt due to it. And I think we've got a good record overall, consistently in doing so. But there are occasions, clearly, when that's not possible. I think Scott Walker provided us with a very good summary of the contents of the report. Just a few That is right. Okay. Can you? Hopefully that's fine there. Right. And what Scott was saying really is excellent. Our in-year collection rate of 97.53% for council tax collection, 96.46% for non-domestic rates really is quite simply outstanding, and all credit should go to the those in local taxes in the finance team for all the work they've done. And it's not just for 23-24, but it's been the case over many years. It's consistently an excellent performance. Also, our in-year collection rate of some 99% for housing rents is also excellent, really good. This income funds most of the work in our housing revenue account, including our housing investment programme. Just as I said earlier, I think everyone in this committee should thank our staff, both within local taxes, within housing, and covering the sales ledger, for really the job that they've done. Going forward, I can also assure elected members that alternative methods of collection and recovery are being investigated at every opportunity in order to keep future write-offs to a minimum. Where new or additional information is received by the council that allows us to recover the debt, then the charges will be reinstated and collected. We don't give up, we are persistent. Councillors, I'm more than happy to move the paper.
Happy to second.
Okay, do we have any comments? Okay, can we agree the paper? Excellent. That's quite a bit quicker than has been the case with this paper in previous years. Right, we move on to the next report, and that is on the missing shares pilot. You'll all have the report. I'm going to ask Kirsty Stephen to come to the on Elaine Ritchie as well. I'm not quite sure whether you're going to take the video first or, yeah, on you go. And the video, I think will last about 5 minutes, but I think it'll help to explain, you know, what missing shares are about.
I'll do a quick introduction and then hand over for the video, if that's okay.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you. The report in front of you provides feedback on the success of the missing shares service piloted since September 2021 and seeks agreement for the same level of funding to extend the service for a further 3 years via the second home's budget as recoverable income. The missing shares service provides support and advice to owners of shared buildings to enable communal repairs, and as a last resort provides a mechanism to pay a missing share for the minority of owners who are unwilling or unable to pay their share to progress the necessary works. The service, through its proactive and collaborative approach, reduces resource impacts on other council services. It benefits local homeowners and businesses by removing the barriers to resolve disrepair issues by empowering property owners through support and advice through a missing shares fund if required. In a very short time, the service has facilitated a significant number of building repairs simply through support and advice, equating to 800,000 and a further 1.1 million through the missing shares option. There's a clear mechanism to recoup the cost of any missing shares by application of a charge in order on the property titles. However, a speedier 5-year payment plan is implemented, and to date 150,000 has been spent on missing shares and we've recouped 50,000 already. The report details the financial spend and positive feedback from service users, which highlights the benefit and impacts of the service for minimal costs. The report recommends that committee acknowledges the success of the pilot and agrees the funding of the service for a further 3 years via the second home's budget. During the extension period, further work will be carried out to establish the future viability of how the service will operate on a full cost recovery model. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. And We now move to the video, I think. Yep.
Been a tremendous help in organising the missing shares. If it wasn't for her help, we would be still struggling today. She is doing an excellent job, both for the owners of the property and for the council.
It's an amazing service, and I highly recommend anyone speak out to like Kaylee there. The missing share service, it's great. Even if you don't go through the whole process, the advice and support they give you is great.
Once Kaylee became involved, she organised meetings and found out about resources and has been absolutely invaluable. Now we're at a situation where this job should be going ahead in the next few weeks, and if, without the help of Kaylee and ultimately the council, we still would be absolutely nowhere. So I can't thank Kaylee enough for her tenacity and her help, and also the council for backing her.
Kaylee Mustard has been with us throughout it all, and we couldn't have got to where we're at now without her. They've been amazing. She's been amazing every step of the way with helping us with our forms and making sure we had everything done correctly and by the book. And like I say, we couldn't have got the work done without her constant assistance throughout the whole over a year. So thank you, Kaylee.
Missing Shares have supported us through work that we've required to have done on our building in Perth. It's contained of multiple occupants, which are owner occupiers, tenants and commercial properties. They have guided us through the process of missing shares. They've been there to support us at every step of the way and have guided us throughout. They've been a great support to us for work that we've been trying to get completed for ages, and we've actually getting the work done now. As I say, they're a great service, and I think it's a service that will be well used once people are very aware of it. A great team and a great support to those going through the process.
Okay. Well, once we got the sound going, I think you would certainly have heard that, and I think it gets the message over quite clearly. Obviously, person Kaylee Mustard is the missing shares officer, and today, though, we have Kirsty Stephen as well as Elaine Ritchie. First of all, can I ask, are there any questions? And I see Billy Ahern. Chris, you've got a question.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that short presentation. I fully supported this scheme when it was set up in 2021. As you well know, we had a couple of issues in my ward with blocks of flats that require the work, but we're 3 years down the line and that hasn't gone ahead. And I was assured when we were setting up the scheme that would be something that we'd looked at, and I just wonder how you were picking which flats to do and which areas to do it in. Because not one of the ones in the particular area within the city centre have been done yet.
We followed through on any inquiries where we felt the missing shares offer would be useful. I'm more than happy to have a look at the ones that you're referring to, though, Councillor Ahern. There may well have been other reasons why that approach wasn't taken.
Okay, I'm willing to sort of let you know which areas. Elaine knows exactly which blocks I'm talking about, I think.
On specifics. Councillor Barrett, Peter.
Thanks. I wanted to ask for clarification on paragraph 4.6, which refers to a £200,000 cap on missing shares. And is that still in operation, or has paragraph 5.3, which talks about the second homes budget reserves underwriting any future requirements, does that mean that this is no longer required? Or also the report talks about the current level of missing shares funding being expended being 144,000. So we would be getting kind of close to the cap if it was still in operation or if it wasn't going to be waived in future.
Yes, you're correct. In section 4.6, it refers to the £200,000, which was simply really to underwrite any significant debt that might be generated as a result of the missing shares. So the spend to date now is roughly around about £150,000. However, that is recoverable income. And within this short pilot period, we've already managed to recoup £50,000 of that £150 spend. So I think the £200,000 was really a safety net in terms of accruing debt, but it is a recoverable income.
Okay, so can you just clarify, is the 200,000 kind of like default, or is it the kind of working capital limit? Because if it's the working capital limit, we're getting guy close and the scheme could fall apart with, you know, another few applications.
It's the default in terms of the 200,000. That's what went with the cap. But Stephen Coyle on the line in terms of giving us clarification on that. Because clarified that earlier. Oh.
Yeah, that would just be for the defaults. That's not sort of like the working capital. So there's not actually any money that's came out of the affordable home second reserve at the moment, because as Kirsty said, it's recoverable income. It would only be if we became an issue with any charges on property titles, etc., that we would maybe need to draw down money from the second home reserves to recover that. So it's just the default at the moment. It's not a working capital.
Okay, hopefully will suffice. Councillor Duff, John.
Thanks, Convener. Actually, the question that Councillor Barrett put forward was the same question I was going to ask. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any further questions? Okay, I'm going to move this. Oh, sorry, it only's just come up. Councillor Barrett again. You have a second question, Peter.
Yep, thanks very much, Convener. The council did seem to be overly cautious in embracing the missing shares scheme at the very start, and I wonder whether it's still being overly cautious. Are we going to learn significant lessons in the next 2 and a bit years of the pilot that we haven't learned already, and should we not just be mainstreaming this as business as usual?
The reason that we're extending it for further 2 years is to maybe extend it to rural areas. We've really focused on Perth City and we really need to look in rural areas, but we want to look at other options that this miss and share element can also cover, particularly with factor services. And that's an area that's cropping up with new developments. And we want to use the period of the 3 years to allow us to look at that in terms of any development we can do in that area.
Anyone else with a question? Okay, I'm going to move the report. I think I'm right in saying this self-same report will go to housing next week, and I'll probably there make 1 or 2 comments. And I think it's maybe the contrast with Stirling, because they don't have a missing shares scheme, but they do have a building health check scheme, and we don't. And it just one wonders if there's options, possibilities in that front, but I think that's further down the road. For today, I think it's clear from the feedback that's contained in this report that a significant amount of communal repair improvements totaling some 2 million have been achieved in quite a short time through the missing shares service, with only, I stress, 1 officer, and with a mechanism to recoup costs without great financial pressure to the council. I think given the number of buildings in shared occupancy and in disrepair, there's clearly an ongoing demand for this service. I think the feedback from service users alone highlights the benefits, and we can't lose sight of the consequences of deteriorating buildings to residents, to businesses, to the public, to the council. The methods of missing share service is a method of reducing those pressures, and we really do want, and if we extend it beyond, further beyond Perth City, it is about place and making our communities look better going forward. I think the budget request will simply underwrite any significant debt resulting from the service. I think to date, the existing mechanism to recoup costs, that appears to be effective, with any missing share costs promptly recovered through the repayment plan process. By supporting a 3-year extension, there's also the opportunity to investigate the full cost recovery of the missing shares officer and other income opportunities. Additional data will also provide a clearer picture on the viability of the service in the longer term. I certainly believe that this is an innovative way of benefiting a variety of parties in a cost-effective way, and therefore I propose this motion. I say, clearly we do have our financial constraints. I think this is an excellent scheme, and I think there are other options and possibilities going forward. So I move the motion.
Yeah, I'm happy to second the motion, and I do take on Councillor Barrett's point about I wouldn't want to think it was constrained by budget without us knowing about it, and we can take decisions within the chamber to do it. I think it's an extremely worthwhile a spend to save. The longer you leave repairs on a building, obviously, the more expensive it gets, and then unaffordable for everybody within the block of tenements. So get it done and then charge. But we don't have to. Not far from here, where I walked down today above Bob and Bert's. I wasn't going in, I was just walking past. You see the missing shares that have been done in the centre of the town, and their logo, their advertising banner is there. So you can see it actually in action within a couple of 100 metres of this building. So I think it is a really good paper. It's a really good way forward, and I think we should get updated during the pilot and decide if we're going to extend it or not on the evidence that comes forward. So happy to second the report as it is, but I think members would like to be kept informed of how it's performing, and then we have the choice to invest further in it or not. Thank you.
Thanks. Right, and I'd also, you mentioned Bob and Barts. I know there's then also been and is the involvement there of the City Heritage Trust with Bath and Kinross Heritage Trust, and I know that they are very supportive of the scheme indeed. I'm moving to comment. First of all is Bailey. Bailey, Ulster, on you go. Oh, right, I've only just seen. Want a point of clarification requested by Tom McEwen. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Convener. As Convener of Housing and Social Wellbeing, I'd just like to point out that this committee here, the Finance and Resource Committee, is approving the funding for this, and that this paper will come to my committee next week, where we will approve the extension of the Mission Share service, and the councillors who've asked questions today will also have a second chance to inquire further on the further detail of the different projects and what has been done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McEwen. Ulster, you wish to make a comment?
Very happy to support this initiative. It was something I was quite excited about when it first came before. I think it was either Housing or Full Council 3 or 4 years ago now. The figure of £1 million of repairs unlocked, if you will, that was mentioned in the presentation and is also mentioned in the report, is the clincher for me, really, that a spend on the part of the council of just under 200,000 has generated over £1 million in repairs which in some cases unwilling or unwilling owners or absentee landlords would have dodged if not for this policy. And it seems the policy acts as a deterrent as much as anything, but we have to be ready to act, else the deterrent effect will have no teeth. So very happy to see this continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Councillor Ian James. Ian?
Thanks, Convener. And I just wanted to pass on my thanks to all the staff that are administering this fund. I know somebody who was an indirect recipient as one of the actual shareholders, and they another member in the block of flats actually applied for the missing shares and was successful. And it saved a significant amount of money for everybody, to be honest, and a building from falling into total disrepair. So this scheme is a stroke of genius, I've got to say, and very, very supportive of it and the staff. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Now, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. I think I sat in that chair as convener of SPNR when this scheme was first introduced, and I'm delighted to see how well the service has developed and how well the assistance has been received. I think we've all got problems in our wards where shared ownership of a building in need of repair cannot be progressed because of one or two owners who are unable or unwilling to contribute. As we've heard through the video, the Missing Share scheme has had an extremely positive impact in Perth and Kinross. I won't list them, but paragraph 4.7 lists the many achievements that have been made over the last 3 years, and I certainly support the extension of this pilot and the officer post for the further 3 years. Finally, Camilla, can I just thank Kirsty Stephen and her team for the report and the work they're doing, but in particularly, I think I'd like to commend Kaylee Mustard for the work she's doing with the owners and tenants and the obviously helpful, diligent and professional manner in which she carries out her duties, as we heard for the tributes paid on the video. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. And yeah, over 2 years since you chaired Strategic Policy and Resources, it has been a successful scheme. But I'm now going to, I think I'll probably be the last comment in this paper. Councillor Barrett. Peter.
And thanks, Convener, and I think I agree with all the previous speakers. The only quibble I would have with you, Convener, is that I don't think it's innovative. It is common sense and it's vital, and it makes a really big difference in our communities and to residents. I've met residents and seen at first hand the despair and the anxiety and the impact on their mental health when they think that they've got water leaking into their homes and they're unable to see light at the end of the tunnel. So I think the Missing Share scheme has certainly transformed the lives of people living in the city centre. You mentioned the building above Bob and Bert's. There's the buildings above Patterson's across the road, which I think was the very first Missing Share scheme that we introduced before approving the scheme that's in front of us. So I think it's clearly successful. It clearly prevents significant deterioration in the building fabric of Perth City Centre buildings, and it looks like it's going to have an impact outside of Perth and in rural areas as well. I would like to hear more about the plans to expand it into Missing Shares for factoring services. That seems to open up a whole new can of worms for me, and I wouldn't want to be just nodding that through or that being embarked on at any sort of scale without sort of full committee approval. But like others, I think I really want to commend the work that Kirsty, Kaylee and Elaine have done on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I think actually we've got effectively complete consensus here across the chamber. I take on board a number of the points that you're making, Peter, but I think it is innovative if you ally it potentially with other measures. And I did mention building health check scheme, but that's something I think we have to look at in quite a bit more depth, and is the viability, is even possibility of working with Stirling, perhaps with other councils. There's possibilities, but yeah, I think to date it certainly has been a great success. I very much do want to thank Kirsty, Stephen, Kaylee and Elaine, and for what they've done. And it's not a large group that's directly involved in the scheme. I think it, yeah, I think there's further to go here, and that can be done. Can we agree this paper? Okay, I'm now going to hand over to Grant, who's going to take the next paper on Perth West.
Thanks. Thanks, Convener. So we move to paper 10, which is progress report on the Perth West project, and Serge Barone will present the paper.
Thank you, Vice Convener. This report provides members with an update on the progress made in respect of the funding and income streams that will offset the 33 million estimated expenditure to deliver the first phase of the Perth West project. The first phase of the Perth project aims to create the enabling infrastructure required to deliver Perth Eco Innovation Park, a commercial and industrial park of 11 hectares, extending to 26 hectares in a future second phase. The enabling infrastructure covers an underpass under the A9, public transport and active travel routes, road access, servicing and utilities. The park will support business growth and create new jobs in the clean growth sector. The enabling infrastructure will also unlock site for housing development. Although not all funding and income streams are secured yet, progress is being made, particularly in relation to developer contributions, estimated at 13 million. The report recommends that the committee agreed to proceed with stage 1 of the pre-construction works at an estimated cost of 1.5 million against the capital allocation of 3 million in 24-25, and ask for progress to be reported back to this committee. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Serge, and I'll open up to the committee for questions. Bailey.
Thank you very much for the report, and I laud the ambition that's within here. It's a fantastic direction we're headed in, and it's about how we achieve that ambition. My question relates to how we achieve that ambition. There's talk here of what I might call large numbers of knowledge economy type jobs, the exact upskilling that we need for our area. That's fantastic. However, how do we make sure that that comes to fruition? So, for example, we're putting in this groundwork. We are working with partners on this. How do we then make sure that the type of development that comes is the one we expect and want? So there's been cases in the past, obviously, where people have converted employment land to housing land. There's been cases in the past where employment land, the applications have actually come forward for distribution park type usage, which doesn't bring the skilled jobs. It just sort of extends the sort of the distribution networks of the big giants. So I was wondering what the safeguards are that we're putting in place to make sure this infrastructure is harnessed by true knowledge, job and wealth creators, rather than an extension of the distribution parks that we see in the Central Belt. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll take the first part of that question, Serge, because I raised it myself. It's very important that we don't just build service plots. Because of where it sits, it will be the ideal position for a distribution depot. And we'll have to look at funding it as it goes forward, but I think it'd be preferential if we kept ownership and we have control of what goes in to that site. Because the whole idea behind this park is to bring higher upskilled jobs. It's not to be a distribution centre. So I think the way that the employment land is developed will be critical towards us. And I've raised this with Serge before at pre-agenda, so you'll maybe have a comment on that. It's a very good point.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it is a good point, and it will be important to see how we are developing the serviced land and who will effectively come and develop and occupy these service employment land. And this is why we put as part of from now on till effectively is going back to the council for full approval, that we have to work with the market and developers to effectively find the right developers and the right occupiers for the site. We've started that work already, just to effectively avoid effectively to have potentially the wrong occupiers for the site. The branding of the commercial park is quite important. So we've branded that the Eco Innovation Park, and as the reason behind it is we need to attract the right people behind that approach and ethos or values of the park.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions on the paper? Bailey, a second question?
Yep, sorry, this is only me, but this is a big chunk of money. My second question, thank you for indulging me, is on paragraph 5.2 of the report that mentions a Tay Cities deal grant of 5 million has been earmarked for the Innovation Park. Is that one of these where we have that challenge that the 5 million was set at 2019 or 2018 money? Forgive me, I don't remember when the deal was signed. And now we're finding ourselves having to make up the difference. Or are we reassured that we can achieve what we were meant to achieve from that money, even with the construction inflation that's happened since it was agreed? Thank you.
That may be for Serge. Yep.
Yes, it's a set allocation from the TCTs deal, which was set obviously a few years ago. That allocation will really focus on the innovation element of the enabling infrastructure. So effectively, we still have flexibility to see how this can be used, because if you agree to the paper today, we will go and do some pre-construction works, and the design of it will effectively enable us to make the best use of that money. But the 5 million are set. We have to work with the 5 million.
Does Mr. Walker want to add anything to that? Okay, thanks. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Vice Convener. It was just, I think it's a quick question. In relation to the decision today, although there's some larger figures mentioned in the report, our risk exposure, if you like, in terms of this decision is just for the 1.55 million, is it? I forget that. 1.55 million of the monies that are available. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's just drawdown of what the monies that are already there. Thanks. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks. It was just inspired by Bailey's second question about the T-City drawdown of the T-Cities money. Looking at the key milestones in 5.11, the approval of the T-Cities full business case would be by March 2025, by which point, given that the approval here is for this financial year, we could have spent $1.5 million on design works for something that then potentially doesn't get T-Cities business case approval. Is that correct?
So the process is a lengthy process with the T-Cities deal. So we have to go through the different stages, which is first of all the outline business case, which we hope will be approved in July. And the full business case obviously go to the joint committee later in the year or beginning of 2025. But we have the opportunity between now and March 2025 to effectively propose a new funding profile for this 5 million, so we can reaccelerate some money in 24-25, potentially to offset some of the 1.5 million that we are, if you decided today. So there's a possibility to reaccelerate the money this year.
The T-Cities deal money and the way it's profiled and that is quite open to, because some projects are falling behind and you can accelerate other ones moving forward and push them back. Thanks. No further questions, so I will move the report. And as requested at the council budget meeting on the 28th of February this year, this report provides the committee with an update on progress made to securing the remainder of the funding to deliver the first stage of the Perth West project. The Perth West project will unlock site for developing employment land, which our economy desperately needs to create new skills and job opportunities, and to develop the Perth Eco Innovation Park to attract investments in our clean growth sector. It will also unlock sites for housing development land and, importantly for us, new affordable homes. We know that it's difficult for the private developers to raise finance for significant enabling infrastructure investment, and there is a need for the council to intervene first with a long-term obligation on developers to meet proportionate costs through developer contributions. Council has already agreed to allocate £10 million towards the project in March 2023, and this committee agreed to rephase £3 million of that expenditure to this current year. Officers are working hard to secure income to meet the overall Phase 1 project costs, and importantly, although not secured, we are making progress with the developer contribution element. We know that there are risks, but this report identifies a decision path which would help us to manage these risks. We believe that sufficient progress is being made to start pre-construction works, and this report is asking us to agree to proceed with these works using circa £1.55 million from the £3 million agreed allocation. As council, we are committed to support people and businesses to be able to prosper in our local economy, which support low carbon ambitions and offer opportunities for us all. And the Perth West project will help us deliver on this commitment. So I'm happy to move this paper for your approval. I'll ask Councillor Donaldson a second, please.
More than happy to second.
Thank you. Do we have any comments on the paper? No comment. I don't see any comments. So we do have one. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Vice Convener. No, it just to back up, I think what you've said in your moving the paper, Perth West is very important for the economic growth of the city and the wider area, and in order to expand and develop Perth, both the Perth West and Eco Innovation Park and the Crossdale Link Road will be vital in terms of unlocking serviced employment land and housing development, which will help our city grow and develop. So I very much welcome this paper and the decision we're about to take. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. It was remiss of me not to thank the officers in economic development, Serge and his team, and people who've been involved in writing this paper, not just bringing this paper forward, but being involved in it a little bit myself. I know there's a lot of moving parts here, but it's vitally important, this project, for the future of Perth City and by dint of that, the whole of Perth and Kinross. So thank you for your work, and I'm sure we'll all be continuing to look forward for further updates as we move successfully forward. Thank you. So if there's no other comments, can we agree the report? Thank you.
Okay, we now move to item 11 on the agenda, and that's the request to draw down early learning on the Early Learning and Childcare Reserve for support for pupils coming up in Primary 1. And I'm asking, I call on, and is here, Sheena Devlin to introduce the report. Sheena.
Thank you, Convener. According to the latest Scottish Government figures, in 2023, 37% of all pupils, so that's circa 260,000 individuals in our schools, had an additional support need. This is a 2.8% rise from the 2022 figure, where it was 34.2%. And for comparison, committee might want to know that in 2013, the figure was recorded at 19.5%. An inquiry led by the Education and Skills Committee at Holyrood reported very recently on a range of findings in relation to additional support needs provision across Scotland, and it reported that there is both an increase in the numbers of pupils with additional support needs and also an increase in the complexity of these needs. That mainstreaming is considered a positive in terms of the delivery of additional support for learning. However, resourcing was seen as a challenge, including the availability and retention of specialist staff. The importance of supporting good relationships with families was considered key, and the importance of training for teaching and support staff also considered key. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic generally widened the attainment gap between the most and the least disadvantaged pupils across the UK and other parts of the world. And the Joseph Rowntree Foundation research gave us great detail about that. We know also that a significant number of children with additional support needs have communication needs, and there is a quality bank of evidence for the alignment between communication and their attainment, well-being, attendance at school, behaviour and future life chances. We also know that a number of young people come into school not reaching one or more of their developmental milestones, and therefore find it challenging to participate in learning activities that would be considered appropriate for their age and stage. And this also includes aspects such as personal care. Over the past 3 school sessions, we have diverted and realigned resource to provide additional and different supports to the early stages of primary, and we have seen some successes in some areas, but we have also learned about what has not worked so well. The drawdown on funds from the ELC reserve, monies which can only be used for the purpose of supporting children and young people across early level, is to enable us to operate a different model of support this year in some of our Primary 1 classes, where the level of need is greatest and where deprivation has had a particular impact on development. Importantly, with a view to securing sustainability of this approach, we are also renewing, revising and rescoping 2 important service level agreements that we have with key partners. One is with our partners who provide speech and language therapy for our children and young people, and the other is with a third sector provider who works directly with families in targeted ways. And we intend the focus of this work would be around supporting families in their approaches to ensuring that their children are as independent as they possibly can in terms of their personal care, so that when they come to school, they are able to cope with all aspects of their own personal care. Also, we want to work with those families to help them support their children to better manage and regulate their feelings and behaviour, which can have an impact on their ability to learn and also on the ability of other young people around about them too. And so without further ado, I would be happy to take any questions from committee today, and joining me, Fiona Mackay, the Inclusion Service Manager, and Ben Scott, the Early Years Manager, who are both joining the meeting online. Thank you, Convener.
First question from Bailey Ahern. Chris.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this important paper. And it's unfortunate that we're seeing an increase in young people with additional support needs. My question is just on some of the figures in paragraph 5.2 on page 148, where you state that almost 35% of all children and young people have an additional support need. And then further on in the paragraph, we go through various groups with autism, communication support, and taking the figures that are based there for 2023, that only adds up to 21.8%. So I just wonder where the difference is between the 21.8 and the 35. Is that a different category, or is there some explanation for that difference? Thank you.
Bailey Ahern, in the census return, there are 25 different types of need that can be recorded, and indeed that are recorded. And so what we've got in the paper is not a list that includes all of those 25. So the ones that are listed here are the ones that are most prevalent in this particular cohort of young people at the early stages in primary school. And also some young children will have more than one level of need recorded as well. So the percentages there were never meant to tally up to the overall percentage. So apologies that that wasn't clear. Thank you.
No, that's fine. I did think there was there. I didn't. Does it include undiagnosed or diagnosed? Because obviously the educational psychologists can come up with a recommendation that it goes for assessment, and those aren't necessarily diagnosed. And I just wonder whether it includes both those. Thanks.
I don't know, but perhaps Ben or Fiona might know the answer to that question.
Happy to come in there. In terms of the autism marker, then that is a diagnosed category. However, the additional support needs that may be arising from undiagnosed exploration, I suppose, of autism would still be captured in other data that related to additional support needs.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll move to next question. Yeah, no, I was just going to move on to Councillor Duff. John.
Thank you. Yeah, it is obviously concerning at the levels of children with additional support needs. However, my question is in relation to paragraph 6.2, which maybe is light at the end of the tunnel kind of comment, if you like, in that you say it's not anticipated the same level of need will manifest the following year. Is a lot of the problems we're experiencing put down to COVID and the experience that these young children have had coming through that period of time? And are we seeing things changing as a result of life returning to a more normal type of situation?
What we know from research through people like Joseph Rowntree Foundation, through the Education Endowment Foundation and a range of other resources, is that the COVID-19 pandemic did have a disproportionate impact on those who were already living in more deprived circumstances, Councillor Duff. And one of the things that we do know is that we've seen a stretch in terms of the gap between the most and the least disadvantaged in society as a direct result of that. We also know that young people who were born during periods of lockdown, for example, weren't able to have the same kind of access to the range of groups where they might be interacting with other young people, where they would be exposed to different groups of adults and all of that, in, if you like, informal learning that helps secure development, and particularly in terms of speech communication, but also in terms of growth and fine motor skills. And then obviously for toddlers, that whole bit about being in with other groups of young children and learning how to take turns, wait your turn, take your time, and not need instant gratification and an immediate response from an adult before you might start playing out. So we do know that there have been a significant impact on particular groups of young people, and we're certainly seeing that. So the work that we are focusing on just now is about both the complexity and rise of additional support needs generally across the population, coupled with that double whammy, if you like, of the impact of deprivation and the impact that the pandemic has had on those who have who live in deprivation as well. What we do anticipate is that this model is about providing, if you like, a smoother transition from preschool learning into more formal learning in primary schools, and it's to enhance staffing ratios to make the adult-child ratio more akin for that transition year into primary one that young people would have if they benefit indeed from a nursery place. We've also seen a number of people where they haven't actually then put their children into nursery, or young people might only come for their preschool year and not their anti-preschool year. So the figures that we have may well still rise in terms of those who are known to the early years inclusion team, because it may be that in coming to school, that might be their first interaction with any kind of formal learning. And they may not have benefited from any nursery experience, or indeed they may just be now going into what we call their preschool year. So as a 4-year-old, their nursery year. So whilst, you know, it's looking like we're seeing a decline, that still may rise. But what we hope is that by adopting this model, piloting that and evaluating that, we would know if this was a more robust model for putting in and supporting where it was needed. And that's important. It won't be in every class, it won't be in every school, but it will be something that we'll use where it's needed, which is why we're only using either staff that we have available just now who may take an additional rise in some contracted hours, or indeed, if anybody is offered a new contract, it will only be a short-term, fixed-term contract. So there'll be no permanent contracts arising from this approach at this time. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Barrett, Peter.
Yeah, Councillor Duff asked my question, and it was very well answered. Just want to check that, you know, in paragraph 6.2, Sheena, where you're saying that the same level of support won't be required next year, you're not saying that no level of support will be required, yeah?
That's correct. We're not saying there will be none, but we are not anticipating that it will be on the scale that it is currently. Okay, next is Councillor Stewart. Now, I happen to see he has got QS. I presume it's at least 2 questions. Could you ask your first question, because there's a number of others that do want to questions. I'll come back to your second question later.
That's fine. Thank you, convener. Obviously, it's an area of which everybody will be concerned about and wanting to do our best to support those children with additional support needs. I just wanted to ask about this. I don't think I'm quite understanding the funding solution. We need to draw down £636,000 from the earmarked reserve, but we're not creating any additional posts. So what is, where is the money going, and how is it not, how is it something that we can turn the tap on in presumably August, but without additional, without that involving additional staff?
There will be additional staff. What I'm saying is we are not anticipating that there will be additional permanent posts made. So we have a lot of the staff who work across early years, Councillor Stewart, work part-time. So they work small amounts of hours, and it would be by offering additional hours. And if we do have additional posts, they would be on a fixed term basis and not permanent, was what I said. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I did note about the the model of support will be developed by temporary extension of existing contracts. So that's the staff on sort of a few hours getting more hours per week. But it also says redirecting current temporary provision. So where's that? What's it being redirected away from in order to be directed towards this?
Ben and Fiona would be able to give you some examples of that, but I don't have that level of detail. Thank you.
I would be able to come in there, Councillor Stewart. So in the previous 3 years models, some other schools have gained a very small level of support around about developmental milestones, but we've relooked at that and realigned some of that resource to be focused more on the additional support needs. And that's the element that's the play assistant level. So there's been a realignment of that to ensure that where there are higher levels of need in particular schools, or indeed greater complexity of need, that there's be a realignment of that resource.
Thank you.
Okay, next question, and also wants to ask 2 questions, Councillor Cuthbert. So I'll just take 1 question just now, Dave.
Thank you. Yes, it relates to what Bailey Ahern was talking about on 5.2. At Learning and Families, I asked if we could have a report sent to the councillors outlining all the different categories with the numbers to show the trends so we can get an idea of where they are. So I'm just really repeating that request and ask if it could be sent to everybody here as well. Thank you.
Happy to do that.
Right. Next is Councillor Rebick. John, and I see you too have 2 questions, but I'll take your first question. Okay.
Sorry about that, convener. And yes, thank you. I'm trying to put this, it's a half a comment, it's a half a question, so I'll put it in question form. Do we have to be careful that whilst the rise of recognised additional support need is undoubtedly challenging, very challenging, both in terms of the financial impact, but beyond that as well. But is the danger that we forget sometimes that there is a positive aspect to this, that whilst we're recognising additional support need now, whether formally by diagnosis, professionally or otherwise, that we might not have recognised before, that's actually a good thing, because we are able to then therefore put in place early interventions such as we're doing today that actually has long-term benefit. And I think we have to be really careful that whilst there's challenges, this is not a completely negative thing. Recognising neurodivergence, for example, in some of our younger learners where their minds are just different and not lesser is a real important point to make, I think. So do we have to be careful that we just see this as a problem when in actual fact it's not?
I'm happy to share again, Councillor Rebick, that one of the main outcomes as reported through the Education and Skills Committee at Holyrood was about that mainstreaming is considered a positive in terms of the delivery of supporting additional support for learning, but also recognise some of the challenges that exist around resourcing that. But undoubtedly, yes, the celebration of the range and diversity of young people who are in our schools is something that we always strive to do.
Okay, Councillor Illingworth, David.
Thank you, convener. It's a more general question about the disadvantages of COVID and lockdown. Were there any other age groups apart from the P1s and P2s affected by lockdown across the education system?
Sheena.
I think the short answer would be all age groups. However, if we think about young people for whom their experience, particularly as it related to them undertaking their national qualifications during that time, was a particular challenge. One of the things we are beginning to see, number of young people who have then, during the last 4 years, moved on to further or higher education. We're seeing dropout rates, particularly in some subject areas, probably higher than we might have seen before, Councillor Illingworth. But I think it would be fair to say that everybody was disadvantaged in some way. It's the longevity of that will probably be different in different cohorts for different reasons. And there's quite a bit of research across the whole spectrum of society in terms of how those periods of lockdown and the time since have impacted on young people, on young adults, and indeed on family life generally. One of the areas that we are seeing as a significant challenge is about attendance at schools, particularly in some of our primary schools and probably across all of our secondary schools. So that there's work well underway to try and redress that and reverse that. But absolutely, I would suggest that everybody was disadvantaged in some way or another. Yep.
Can I ask a supplementary?
Yes, you can.
So if the United Kingdom had adopted a Swedish approach to lockdown, do you think the impact would have been less on young people?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question. I wouldn't have a view to share with committee on that, Councillor Illingworth. Thank you.
I don't think that's actually apposite. But I think what does come over, Shana, in what you're saying is for the kids going to primary one this autumn, the position is especially pronounced. And that's why I think it's important these measures are being put forward. Can I come back to earlier questioners? Councillor Stewart, Colin, I think you have another one. Yeah, question to ask.
Thanks, convener. Like Councillor Cuthbert, it was to follow up on Bailey Ahern's question about the gap between the 21.8% reported types of additional support needs and the 35% overall. I know you said that there would be other conditions and there would also be pupils with multiple conditions, but pupils with multiple conditions would reduce the gap rather than increase it. So there must, you said there were other sort of smaller types of conditions, but that gap from 22% to 35% is 13%. That's not small numbers. That's quite a big number. So what is generating? What are the conditions that are generating that gap between the reported ones and the overall?
Fiona will be able to give you a bit more detail, Councillor Stewart, but we've only commented on a few of the 25 different additional support needs that we have to respond to in the annual census. And so the numbers were never intended as written in 5.2 to add up to 35%, but the totality of our return in the 2023 census demonstrated that the near 35% was in fact our figure. So when we share the information that shows the response in terms of we can take a printout, for example, from CMIS, the Management Information System, which shows the range and type of need that we record, and we can give overall figures for that. And we'd already committed, as Councillor Cuthbert said, at Learning and Families to do that. But it was never that we would then say that that totality there added up to 35%, because we're not looking to support all children and young people with an additional support need in this way, only a very targeted group.
So, okay, so that 22% that we've calculated there is actually just with the certain needs that will be supported, and it's the ones showing significant increases, but there are other things on top of that separate which maybe didn't increase or won't be supported by the programme.
And the other thing to consider, of course, is that the spread of additional support needs is not even across all schools. And so there may also be clusters of children and young people in a concentrated way in a particular classroom that would make a significant impact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cuthbert, Dave, do you have another question?
Yeah, I'm just looking to clarify and be certain that what we're being asked to approve is paragraph 5.11, 511. Basically, the figures, I'm a bit confused by them, but I assume that the 383,000 is for the first year and then the 253 for the second, but that differs from the action we're being asked to approve, which is 393 and 243. I'm just making sure we're approving the right one. It's not the figures in the table.
I can come in and answer that.
Oh, yeah, happy to, Ben. Yeah.
They're actually different figures. So at 5.11, there are two different allocations. So the deprivation allocation is using the criteria that we'd used previously over the last 3 years, which is around about deprivation and developmental milestone data, and the additional enhanced support is that which is focused on the children coming through with complex additional support needs. So there are two different types of support. So the deprivation allocation is where it's an ECP allocation who have that background in child development, and the enhanced support is the play assistant allocation. So it's just to show committee that there are two different types of support in there, but again, that's why it doesn't match to the previous figure, because there are the two different year drawdowns too. So they are two different figures. So that's correct.
Can I just point of clarity?
Yeah, on you go.
Point of clarity is there two different things. They're showing the split over the top one's showing the split over the full academic year, which comes to the same total of the point underneath, which is over the 2 financial years. And it's just, I think, a coincidence that they're so close, 383 and 393 and 253 and 243, but when they add up, it's the same figure.
That's exactly correct, Councillor Lang, and I was just going to come in on that very point. It's just coincidence that they look as they do. The reality is this is about a split of money which will have to cover an academic year, but the drawdowns will be made in 2 different financial years. And there's just a look-alike in terms of the 383 and the 393, but the 383 refers to a different allocation of funding. Thank you.
I may have worked out that myself or asked the question at pre-agenda. I'll let you decide.
Okay, I think the last question is going to be John Rebick. John.
Thanks again, convener. I hope this is not too much of a leading question, and I know this is slightly different, but is it correct that the principle of allocating money with a view on deprivation and additional support need is already established? And to the last administration's credit, what was Lifelong Learning Committee at that point, the mainstream staffing ratio of teachers was adjusted at least at the edges to take into account deprivation and additional support needs. So the principle of this kind of activity, I believe, is already set, but I'm just wondering if you can confirm that, please.
Okay.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Rebick. In fact, I would go further into say than around at the edges, because what happened was with the approval of the revised staffing standard for primary school, which had previously not had a weighting around deprivation or additional support needs, now has both of those weightings. And what that meant was a realignment of staff from some schools to others when the weightings were applied, and we've now been using that staffing standard for a couple of years. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I did say at the edges, it was the last administration. I wasn't trying to overegg my appropriate compliments too far, but thank you for that.
Okay, I can't see any further questions, so I'm going to move the report. What I would say is that the standalone report comes before this committee, it's as a request that really is necessary and for a number of reasons outlined within the report. First of all, it's in relation to increased levels of support required to meet the needs of children entering primary one this autumn. And I think if you look at the report, you can see the graphs on page 148 and the impact of COVID taken to the current point. I think nationally and locally, there's been increases in the levels and the complexity of the needs of children and young people over the last few years, and that was detailed in a recent Public Health Scotland report. And so, with this knowledge, and also to mitigate against the impact of COVID and our own local knowledge of the gap in our local developmental milestone data, we have been, and the Education Department have been providing additional support in primary one, focusing on deprivation over the past 3 sessions. The main focus of this targeted report is to progress levels of attainment towards developmental milestones. Learning from that, what is what and what is not worked so well, coupled with the levels of need within this particular cohort, meant a different model approach was required this year. It's anticipated that this model will provide an experience likened to that in early learning and childcare, and will enable children to be well supported during the very first year in primary school, with staffing ratios that will afford more targeted and bespoke support. This cohort of children starting primary one in August are the last group of children who had their formative years most negatively impacted by their experience as babies back in March 2020, 4 years ago. Data coming through, I'm informed from the Early Years Inclusion Service, shows reduced numbers of need into 2025, and hence they do not predict levels of need continuing at such acute levels beyond this year, and they would expect to be able to manage need within existing resources. This important resource, what we decide today, will enable the children entering primary one in August this year to have a successful start and to provide them with a solid foundation to the formal school years. I move this report.
Happy to second this report. I hope that we get an update at the end of the next financial year, and hopefully it's been successful, not just for the council resources, but more importantly for our young people that we're trying to help through this difficult time. So I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comment? Councillor Rebick, John.
Thanks again, convener. I think there can be no doubt that there's a negative post-COVID legacy in our education system. I think it would be churlish to suggest otherwise, and it makes our transformation programme with regard to additional support need over the next little while vitally important. Having said all of that, I do believe that the presumption of inclusion in our education service is absolutely the correct one, both in terms of social cohesion and indeed getting it right for every child. But there's a big caveat to that, and the big caveat is that we need to support it. And I think this paper does exactly that. It's early intervention and action, and if we don't do this now, it will cost us in the long term, both in financial terms and indeed in social capital. This is absolutely the right thing to do today, and I support it 100%. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Councillor Barrett. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, convener. don't want to create a loving with Councillor Rebeck, but I think he's absolutely right in terms of the impact this will have and the lasting impact it will have on the development of children. It has got equalities and fairness at the very heart of this action. It is, the earliest intervention, or almost the earliest intervention that we can make in order to ensure that our young children have the best opportunities to develop in the future, and therefore it is essential work. Thank you.
I don't think there's anyone else wanting to make a comment. I do notice Sheena has just posted she's more than happy to provide an update beyond the end of the forthcoming academic round financial year, if that's acceptable. That enables a full year's implementation to have taken place. So I think we certainly want to be updated. Could there be issues with the kids going into primary 1 when they move on to primary 2? There's a whole variety of things here, but there's no doubt in my mind we are doing here the right thing at the right time, and not to take action such as this, I think would create far greater issues, social society issues further down the road. I think it's a no-brainer, and I'm glad and I thank Sheena for bringing forward this report. Can we agree the report? Thanks. Now going to move on to the last paper today, which is on disposal of minibuses, and that is going to be taken by Grant Lane. Grant.
Thanks. I will try and introduce this paper, but Councillor Barrett's last comments seared into my mind a vision that I'm going to find difficult to put to one side at the moment. Apologies, Councillor Rebeck.
Jump in very briefly. My last comment was going to be that I don't want to end on a too frivolous a note, but he's even joined my gym. You can tell by his body shape that he's going more often than I am, but I am getting worried.
Next week, next meeting. So we'll move on, and I'm really happy to see this paper come. Peter will remember that this was brought up at the Anti-Poverty Task Force a year ago, and it's great to see it come here today. And I'll hand over to Alison to. Is this the first report you've brought forward?
To this committee,
So
yes.
here we go.
To be kind. Thank you. We recognise the importance that public access to transport has in connecting communities, particularly in our rural areas. However, it is understood from engagement with local community groups that a lack of access to a vehicle such as a minibus can be a barrier when wishing to implement their own local transport solutions, despite a willingness to do so. As part of the 3-year programme funded by the Council to develop a public transport model that improves access, we are in the process of purchasing a number of 6 to 8 seater vehicles to support community transport groups, which will help with this. We're also proposing today to expand the offer to communities by changing the current policy position of disposal by way of a public auction for our minibuses. This would allow those that are in an appropriate condition to be transferred for community use. We will need to develop and set out clear policy criteria for this, and it is the intention that the new policy be brought back to Finance and Resources Committee for approval in September. In the interim, it's also proposed that no minibuses will be disposed of while we work that through. Colleagues in the room, Nigel and Pat are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Do we have any questions on this report? Question from Peter Barrett.
Yeah, I'll be quick, Vice Convener. It's just with regard to the definition of what constitutes adequate and or appropriate for community use. I'm hoping that that'll be a quick exercise and not something that's going to require lots and lots of angst and suffering to come to definition.
Yeah, it will, and we will bring be up Well, no, I think it should be, because I think we should be going further and making sure that these have got a full year's MOT, etc., before we pass them on, so that we're not passing on a liability. But we can discuss it later. But no,
If I could just come in, it's just a fair and transparent process so that communities are aware of how the decisions are made as well, and that they're in good working order when they're transferred. It depends on the type of vehicle and the use that the community might have as to matching the most appropriate vehicle to them. So we just need to identify what the criteria would be. I think that would be fair. And Pat, he's nodding.
Councillor McEwen, Tommy.
Thank you, Convener. I think this is an opportunity for the fleet management team to work with the communities team. You know, obviously our community teams know our communities very well and the demands that they have. You know, if you look at the SIF fund, you will see us giving money to local community groups to buy minibuses, and I think this will complete a circle and prevent such a shuffling of money for me to no reason. So what role will the communities group and therefore the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee play in the development of this policy?
Nigel.
Yeah, thank you. We would envisage consulting with the communities team in the first instance with particular regard to the criteria that we would be using to select community groups for the transfer of the asset. So the principles that underpin this proposal would be very much made up through consultation with the community, the communities group. Yeah.
Did you hear that, Councillor McEwen?
Would you've discussed that this paper will come back to this committee, but will also go to Housing and Social Wellbeing?
Yeah, I think it's what we will be trying to achieve as an organisation and through all committees is that the vehicle best suited goes to the community group that can use it to the best advantage, and we'll have to have criteria because we could have competing interests, and it can't be done by ward members of one ward selecting to have the buses go to that area. It has to be by criteria that will stand up to scrutiny. Thanks. Sorry, it's slow here. Must be the time. Councillor Duff.
My question is related to this particular subject. Obviously, in terms of being able to use a minibus, those of us that are of a certain vintage have the classification on our driving licenses, but younger drivers won't. Do we have any schemes whereby we help people without the D1? Is it classification to?
It'd be Midas. We go through the Midas. I'm getting nods about there. And at the Anti-Poverty Task Force, Lethem for All, for instance, offered to help other community groups. They've got the ability to put drivers, prospective drivers, through their Midas test at no cost, because you have to pay for a Midas test. So that enables you to drive people. But Pat will be able to give you the exact.
Yeah, the Midas training is the sort of go-to for people that don't fulfil the criteria. So we too would be happy to be able to support community groups and the relevant drivers for that process. And it is just an approved training course that would be in place.
And does that? I'm trying to think. I need to go back and have a look at myself, but I thought under the law you needed more than just the Midas to use a minibus. But I may be wrong. I'll need to look into that further.
No, because teachers can drive kids about with just a Midas bus, a Midas license. Okay. Not, I don't want to be one to challenge you on the law aspects or anything aspects of that, John. Okay, this has got a lot of interest now. I'll let Elaine come in, and then I'll go back to Councillor Stewart, who I inadvertently missed out. Elaine?
I don't have an amendment. It was just to add to. Thank you. It was just to add on that point, as part of the transformation project we were doing with public transport, we're looking at training with our employment team in terms of expanding that. So that is an area that we're picking up as part of that transformation project. So that's a really good point that's been raised. And also picking up in terms of the community engagement, David Stokoe's team will be hooked in because he knows all the community groups, and I will ensure there's good crossovers between the groups as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Elaine. Thank goodness it wasn't an amendment. Councillor McEwen would probably have seconded.
Anything Elaine says, I will second.
That's what I meant. So after it was, sorry, it's back to Councillor Stewart.
Thanks very much, Vice Convener. I had community councils ask us what's coming up at meetings, and I had outlined this one at a community council meeting on Monday. A member of the public made a useful suggestion, I think, about other items of equipment that the council disposes of at auction that could be passed on to for use by community groups, and I wondered whether we could maybe have an offline discussion after this meeting, given that we're now at 5 o'clock, for when this paper comes back to committee, about those other potential items of equipment that we could make available for community use.
I think that's a sensible suggestion, and whether it comes back and this is a separate paper, it'll be something else to look at. So, Bailey Hearn.
Thank you. Just a quick question on what the definition is of a community group and how we identify them, because I know of a couple of cadet units that would be crying out for minibuses, and they're not necessarily connected to any of the community networks that the council have.
In my view, they'd be entitled to go in, but whether there would be something higher up in criteria that would be more of a community benefit, and that's the idea of having the, what the criteria is going to be before they're allocated, and they're seen to be allocated in a fair way. And it will depend. There's a possibility of 14 buses coming on in one tranche, but next year there'll be nothing, and possibly a year after that I think it's 4. So the criteria will be quite tight in some years, and other years there might be more minibuses available.
That's exactly correct, and it will also depend what the community group wishes to use the bus for, because the buses will need to match the requirement that's needed. So, for example, if there's a bus that's very used to good to do short haul trips, that might suit one particular community group better than another one. So this is why the criteria needs to work through, and I think it's great to have the suggestions coming out today, which we can collect, because this is why we need to bring it back and have a full discussion about all of the different relevant aspects of these things. But it is the intention that cadet groups could apply.
Thanks. Okay, Chris. Yeah. Alistair, I think we can discuss that. Yeah. Your point there. Thomas.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Mine was just simply a point of clarification on the back of Councillor McEwen's ask. My understanding in terms of this paper is that this paper will now be remitted to officers to develop the policy and the criteria, to take that to SEAG, as is stated in the paper, but it was not the intention to take it other committees, because housing and communities could make a claim in terms of those groups. There could be education and learning that has an interest, there could be groups linked to the economy, so it could go to a number of places, but officers were working on the basis that this paper and the development of the policy and the guidance will then be routed through SEAG, and that would be the mechanism to engage with officers before any further and final paper would need to come back to finance and resources. So I just wanted to clarify that, please, Vice Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duff. You're back here again. Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener. I think this is clearly an example of, small changes making a big difference. But I do kind of wonder, and it's touching on what the Chief Executive just said, is, are we kind of over-engineering this process? Do we just need to get on and do it? If we keep talking being a Think Yes Council and JDI, and, I think this is the sort of thing where we don't need elected members' mitts, all over this. We just need to get on and do it and give officers, the authority to get on and do it. So
yeah, it's taken me a year to get this bus on the road, and I want to see it happen as soon as possible. But I think we're moving on. But I think it does have to come back with the criteria and that's set out, because the officers got to have time to, and they've asked for the time to come up with a coherent policy for us to sign off. Is that fair? Thanks. But yes, we'll be back at the next Finance and Resources. Dave.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Yeah, I think this is a fantastic idea. I think it's exactly the sort of thing we should be doing. In Kinross, we've got the Fossoway communities now looking at doing a similar thing to what happened in the Glenfell Community Transport Group. Were they to be able to get the access to a minibus and use it, that would make it much easier. And I can see this being rolled out in other parts of Perth and Kinross where the similar model to Glenfell Community Transport might get set up. So it's an ideal route, and I think it's a great idea because we get virtually nothing back for them. So well done, Vice Convener.
Thank you. I think just if there's no more comments, I think I'll just move the paper instead of going through the report. So right. And we've got a seconder as well. So thanks everybody. Thanks very much. I'll pass back to the convener to thank you actually.
Right. And that, I think, finishes proceedings for today. And thanks for all your contributions. And I think we've got through a pile of stuff, but I think some of it is very positive and will take us forward. Anyway. Oh, you go.
Again, remiss of me to thank Nigel and Pat for their work in bringing this forward, and I look forward to seeing the report done definitely for the next committee. Thank you both.
That's a fish. Thank you.